Okay, good morning everyone. There's one in every room, isn't there? Good morning everyone. Welcome to the Community and Services Committee. Good morning to our visitors as well. It's good to have you here today, and we'll crack on. So there's apologies from Councillor Pascoe received. Somebody moved that the apology be accepted. Moved Deputy Mayor and Phillip. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. The agenda is got a small change in it, that we're bringing the item around the older persons plan and age-friendly Hamilton up to allow those people to get on with the rest of their day afterwards. And you'll notice that item 8 has been circulated under a separate cover, which you've got. Any questions on that? So I move that those changes be made to the agenda. May I have a second? Councillor Yong, all in favour? Opposed? Carried. So we're underway. Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest today? There being none, we'll move on. Peggy's not talking in the public forum as well? Yeah, well, no, talking to the item.
She'll be presenting with no.
Okay, so I haven't been notified of any public forum today, so and Peggy and her team are going to talk in the actual item, so you'll be able to ask them questions then. Just make a brief comment that I didn't put a chair's report together today, but I've circulated an email of some of the meetings I've lately attended for your interest or reading in your own time. Obviously, with my foot up for 3 weeks in a cast, I was a little bit sort of distracted this month. So that's the only reason there isn't a chair's report this month. So we'll move on straight away to the first item, which is actually the last item in your, it's the older persons plan. Pardon? Oh, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. We need to do the minutes. Confirmation of the minutes on page 6 from the April meeting. Any questions?
A tea. Oops, sorry.
Another apology due now.
We used to have a chocolate fish when that happened at WRC.
That's right.
It's missing. Your apology.
No. One tea is missing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right. It's really important to have people who have attention to detail. So thank you for that.
Well, there is no Councillor Mallet with one tea. That person doesn't exist.
Right. Brilliant. We got that. Thank you. With that change, Councillor Casson, you're moving the minutes. Someone please second. Councillor Dave, all in favour? Carried. Thank you. So now we are on to page, the last item, 15, which starts on, which is the older persons plan, and I welcome our visitors here today.
Good morning, councillors. Sorry, that's a bit better. Good morning, councillors. Thank you very much for your time today. I'm just here to open up this report. I'll take the report as read. Just the high-level details, I guess, is that the older persons plan has been going for 2 years now. It's been going very successfully. We're happy that the actions have been completed in the large part, and Council's now looking forwards to being able to support the age-friendly initiative, which Peggy is here to talk to you about today. So yeah, I'll take any questions on the older persons plan, but I will let Peggy talk about the age-friendly plan first. So Peggy Koopman-Boydman is the chair of Hamilton's age-friendly steering group, and there's a few members in the audience here as well who are members of the steering group. So I'll pass over to Peggy to make some comments around that.
Okay, so we just pause, and are you going to talk to the plan, or should we just take questions on that bit first and then move on to the
We can do however you'd like to proceed. Yeah,
so we will. So we'll not to confuse it, because we've got the original plan, and as you can see from the colour coding and what the comment that was just made, a lot of it has been delivered upon, which is really good to see. Now this will be superseded by the age-friendly city that Peggy's going to talk to us next, but are there any questions on the plan, especially from those people who've seen it through? No? No issues, no comments? Oh, sorry, didn't see you.
Okay. What questions are you wanting now? Because I have questions on the
obviously, on the actual reported actions, but I have a few of them, so how do you want to, and they would be to staff?
Yeah, absolutely, we're taking questions on the plan now. Yeah, so it's right time that.
Okay.
Councillor Leary.
So I'm just on page 129 because obviously the recommendation is to retire the plan. Thanks, Nick. Just on the, and these are just for clarification really, on the first action there around outdoor furniture, that wasn't, the comments there are around Lake Domain, that it's to be, more furniture to be rolled out in Lake Domain, but the original plan was not restricted to certain locations.
That's correct. This is just an example of where that's going to be happening.
So how is that action then, if you're going to retire the plan, how is that action picked up citywide?
I think probably with a number of these actions, they're things that have now been kind of integrated into staff work plans to ensure that it's something that's happening going forwards. The thing around age friendly as well is that there's also a lot of benefits to people with disabilities to have similar types of things happening. So it's picked up not just as an age issue, but also as a disability issue as well.
So when you say, Nick, you think it's being picked up, so are you saying that in somewhere in the organisation when we renew a seat somewhere, there's a management policy or a line in a book that says you've got to take into account these things?
Yeah, my discussions that I've had with our Transport and Parks and Open Spaces team specifically has been around making sure that that happens going forwards.
Okay, I'm not going through all of these just in case elected members groan. Just on the second one, the loading zones for pick up and drop off, the parking task force has got that as an action in their work. On number 4, the accessible bus shelters, that says have been installed around the city, more to be completed by the end of 2015-16, which is gone. The original action for that was 11 accessible bus shelters, so so have we put in 11?
Yes, I believe so. My discussions with the transport team is that's correct.
Okay, all right. Over the page on 6 was the, and I do apologise for the number of questions, but this is the first time I've seen the older person's report this term. The forum, and this is around communications as well, and yes, I attended the forum and it was great, but this was also, and this has been a bit of a concern of mine, was supposed to be a wider comms plan rolled out from this organisation to connect with older people, to tell them what's going on, to tell them about the age-friendly city, and I don't know, I think people at that forum talked about websites and, I don't know, ads and magazines like Seasons and stuff like that. So are you saying that we're not doing anything more because it says complete?
No, we are still definitely doing something there. There was a communications plan was signed off. It was actually one of the first things that the older person's advisory panel gave advice to council on. So that was done, and those forums are. It says under time frame it's ongoing. They're intended to continue, and there's advice still coming through to the communications team about things that can be done to help with older people. City
safety signage, and so this is item number 7 there. How was that completed? The General Manager, Chris Allen, has received feedback from me around the signs for the Western Whale Trail with kind of small font. So how in the future when the city does signs, I suppose it's the same question as what I asked before, can I be assured? But my problem is that once we retire a plan, as governors, we have no ability to monitor these things, and sometimes things can slip away. So is that integrated properly into our, because again, obviously sight impaired can benefit in.
So we've got signage guidelines for the different areas of council, and they've been worked on Parks and Open Spaces, City Transportation, etc., etc. So that's all added in, and we also, Judy, who's our disability coordinator, gets heavily involved working with all our different departments proactively on not only signage but accessibility in the wider sense as well. So you can be assured that we have that in all our design guidelines for staff to follow.
Okay, and just last question on point number 12, the large print. Our goal was to expand the large print books, and with an ageing population, and it's important to expand the large print books in our libraries. How many, since we started the plan and put that action in, how many books have we expanded by? Do we know?
I don't know that exact figure for you. What I do know is that there has been an increase in the amount that's been spent in that area. Speaking with libraries, that they have had an increase, but I don't know the exact amount.
I'd like to know that because, you know, an increase could be $100. So if that can just offline can be emailed, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor O'Leary. Councillor McPherson?
Thanks. Look, just going back to page 129, number 2, the transport parking options. 2 questions I want to ask. You've got mobility parking loading zone maps and they're available online. Are there also hard copy maps? I would think for the age group we're talking about that might also be important.
I'm not entirely sure of that, but I do agree, and so we do need to follow up.
And it needn't be hundreds printed, it could be printed on demand. Yeah. So that's one thing. The other one is, it occurred to me that the question of mobility parking in the CBD is good to follow up, but in actual fact, would not most older people need to know what the parking at their local shopping centre is, for instance, and most of them being private parking arrangements? Should we not be looking at a survey there or some sort of work with the owners of the shopping centres to have a consistent policy? Because if the loading zones are available for drop-off and so forth in the CBD, but not at a shopping centre, you could be confusing the hell out of people if we're not consistent across the city. And it occurs to me that you probably get agreement from the shopping centres if you did your work right. So could that be added to the sort of work there?
Yeah, I think that could be a good action for the age-friendly plan going forwards, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, councillors. There being no other questions on that, we will actually... Oh, Councillor Mallett.
Automatically go to Gary.
131, 17, 2 culturally appropriate programs for older people will be implemented annually. What were those?
I think those have been discussions that have largely been going around what's happening for our refugee older people community. So we've been meeting with them to get a bit of a feeling about what some of the issues might be going forwards for them. They're quite interested in being involved in some intergenerational programs to share their knowledge in terms of the things that they've brought from where they've come from and how they could be shared.
So what were the programs?
I think it's just at the moment, it's just ongoing discussions. It has been one area where we definitely need to look at moving forwards and doing a bit more, and that's something that we are picking up as part of the age-friendly plan.
So when were the programs supposed to have been?
Well, we're supposed to have done 2 annually, so that's definitely an area where we do need to put a bit more effort, I think, going forwards.
So give us an example of what might be coming out of it from these discussions.
Well, I think we've got our, these refugee communities, and I think that they definitely have some things that they would like to share.
Is it only targeted at,
No, it's not. That's one of the areas where we've put a little bit of effort, but I do take your point that it is somewhere that we do need to put a bit more of our efforts going forwards.
Is it something that can be done? I mean, is it a real, or is it just a...
I think it's definitely challenging. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think that means it's impossible to do.
Okay.
Okay. So I think that's a good timing, actually, to ask those questions. And Peggy's going to talk about the age-friendly Hamilton, and you might be able to pick up on some of those concerns. Thank you.
Just one question, Madam Chair, if I may.
Sorry, I stood on my good glasses yesterday, so this is an old
I pushed my button after that. Last year, I think it was, or may have been the year before, Judy Small, she organised a couple of mobility scooter workshops, and I was involved with those with her. With the increase in, and we did some presentation at old folk centres and those sort of places, I'm just wondering whether we could put those with when you look at the growth of this industry and mobility scooters, I'm just wondering whether we could include that. Of course, they were well received, particularly at the some of the old age homes and that sort of places.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we can look at going forward. So we've had some discussions with Life Unlimited, who deal with a lot of yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. councillors and Madam Chair. I'd just like to introduce two of our steering group members who are sitting behind me, Margaret Wilson and Graham Kito. And I think offline the rest of the committee are observing what's happening. I'd like to start off by congratulating this council on almost to the day, the 3rd of May last year, accepting a recommendation that you go wider than the Older People's Advisory Panel, which was focusing on what can the Hamilton City Council do for our ageing population in Hamilton, going wider to go to the status of being an age-friendly city, which is an international accreditation. And we would hope that this time next year, we collectively will be able to say that the World Health Organization has accepted the fact that we have lots of things here in Hamilton which are age-friendly, either they already exist or they will exist in the next few years, to make our 12% of older people happier now, and certainly probably about 20% in the time frame of the people here. I would also have to say slightly ruefully two things, that what's good for older people is also good for everybody else. And with a bit of luck, all of you, all of us, are planning for our own old age. So please take a personal interest in what we are doing. And should you have a good idea, as thank you, we already have from the council down the way there on motor scooters, mobility scooters, that was not in the cycling plan. And in fact, where are we going to put mobility scooters in Hamilton? It's a problem in New Zealand overall, and it might want to be a problem that local government takes up. All right, I would like to tell you very quickly what we've done in a year, okay, because it's exactly a year almost. The steering group, whose members include Margaret Wilson, Graham Kito, Del Hood, previously medical director here, Andrew Corkle, who's in Sports Waikato, Yvonne Wilson, Rauawa Kaumatua Charitable Trust, Brent Nielsen, the new CEO of Age Concern, and Malcolm Brooker, known to you as a business person, I think a JP, was it? No, that's Graham, who's the GP. We have, first of all, consulted in a variety of ways. Open forum, some of you, thank you very much, are turned up, and we were most impressed that within 10 days of the election, both the mayor and our chair turned up to our forum to talk about what older people liked about Hamilton, what were the gaps, and what we could do about it. Okay, so that is the focus of Age Friendly. And then the document that we present to the World Health Organization and to you, first of all, by the end of this year, we will have documented what good things we have for older people, and there are lots. Hamilton is flat, and that is a huge advantage over, let's say, Auckland or Wellington, neither of which are even thinking about having an age-friendly plan, as was documented in the Herald last Friday. So we've had lots of consultation with older people. We've had lots of consultation with the providers of services in the areas, for example, of health, recreation, the police, housing, etc. And now we're writing up, or beginning to write up, what are some of the initiatives that exist, what could be enhanced, in other words, developed more, and what might be new. And I'm just going to talk very briefly for some of those ideas. We have, for example, talked at some length already with Sport Waikato. In fact, our meeting last week was held there. And Sports Waikato, with their excellent programs, and Michael Cooper talked with us, would be very interested in ensuring that green prescriptions, I'm assuming that you know what I'm talking about, preventive health measures are particularly targeted at older people, and that many of their existing programs target older people. But it's a way of persuading Sport Waikato that they need to think about people over 65 as well. And one of the things that we are going to do, hopefully, is in conjunction with the Retirement Villages Association, of which I have contact in Wellington. They will, by the time you get there, hopefully, have exercise circuits for you to keep happy and well and the retirement village. And that could be fun. Okay, we were talking about the migrants and refugees just before. We have listened to them, and one of the things that they would like to do, very simple things, a bus stop outside the settlement centre. That's not too difficult, all right? And so we go from that amount of detail, and armchairs and arms, come again, Peggy, rest in chairs. All right, somewhere to put your arms so that when at any age you can go on it and get out of the chair without tipping over the table. Now, I've had that discussion with lots and lots of people in the hospitality industry, and if you find that they're missing in your local cafe, please mention it. And also, if it's too noisy for you, please mention it. Because collectively we can change those sorts of things. And this is the idea of the age-friendly initiative. We have also talked with the police and the civil defence people as to how better we can work with our older people if there is an emergency. As an example, as in the previous time I was here, I talked about Japan, and they have a police person in every block. Now, they might also have 10,000 people in that block, but is it useful to have a register of where we have older people or a denser population of older people or people with disability? We're thinking about that. The police and civil defence are very interested. Age Concern, our new CEO, Brett Nelson, is very interested in publicising what we already have. It's not about you setting up new projects unless you build on what you already have. And so come the 1st of October, which is International Old Persons Day, it happens to be on a Sunday, is it? So let's hope it's on the Friday, the 29th or so. And with a bit of luck, we will have various organisations in Hamilton coming together at Celebrating Age, which you people own, and talking about what old people have available here. And the last one I'll just mention is in business. We are planning ways in which we can talk to business people about older people. Now, there are two ways that business can be interested. One, a lot of older people, and by that I mean people over 65, are still working, and how are they dealing with any difficulties that might pose from a physical point of view, if at all. And secondly, more importantly just for us at the moment, the older people are a target market for quite a lot of commodities, and the business community needs to know that, because a lot of 60 and 70-year-olds have quite a lot of money, thank you very much. And take a look at the new cars, and a huge number of new cars bought in the last year, and quite a few of them are between 65 and 75. And I have to admit that I'm one of them, but you know, they're not all they're not beneficiaries and lower income, all of them. On the other hand, those who are, and those who are struggling a little bit, Age Concern, we are encouraging to take our list of how to do it in house maintenance. Building on previous comments about housing in Hamilton, we have now explored how those who are in houses, Dave, can at least look at the maintenance. We can't, unfortunately, we're working on encouraging developers with respect to how they build their houses, but how older people maintain it. Okay, so these are some of the changes. By the end of the year, we hope to have documented as I said before, the continuing projects, those that are being enhanced and new ones, and you will see that document. But before you see that document, I would really like to hear some comments, just a quick email to Nick or to me. We do have our own email address to say, what about such and such? And that's how we are getting quite a lot of the comments. And it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it will at least go in our project and the initiatives over the next 4 years. So I would just simply finish by saying it's the hard question, so what? Who will benefit from all this? Our aim is to maintain and raise the quality of life for older people in Hamilton now and in the future. Secondly, to recognise that business can actually benefit from that and help the economy of Hamilton. Thirdly, it's good PR for the city. We've got huge PR out of the prize that the Garden's got. This is also a prize, an award at the international level. And my final two would be that we will have access to ideas from the Older People's Network worldwide. And my very final comment would be simply to repeat the principle that what is good for older people is universal design for everybody else. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And I think the key point here is that you're going to develop a plan, a product that will be internationally recognised through the World Health Organisation, that takes what the groundwork that the Older Persons Plan has done, plus the additional work, plus you're calling for feedback, right? Feedback from the community. You're going to bring that to council later.
Yes.
So this is iterative at the moment, what you're talking about, the broad principles, but there will be a product at the end that council can have a look at and decide what actions council are council's responsibilities and what actions are other people's responsibilities in the future. That's just for the benefit of us newer councillors who might not have realised that there's going to be a product at the end. I'm just mentioning that. So that's correct, right?
Well, if I may say so, and I should have emphasised, that there is no budget for the Hamilton City Council. Every member of the steering group volunteers their time. I probably am working at least 2 days a week on this, and I volunteer my time, as do my colleagues. And so it is basically influencing people, like, let's say, Sports Waikato and Age Concern, who already have programs or could be persuaded to have programs that touch older people. How about doing it this way rather than that way? The document that we produce will be an itemisation of what we have, what we are going to improve. And as a result of that, World Health Organisation, well, I mean, I'm most interested in the benefit for Hamilton.
Yeah.
The sidekick is that the World Health will say, that's a good idea, and give us a big tick, and we can put a little sign in the window of wherever, and it's good PR. We will be, if we do it in time, and I hope we do, we will be the first city in New Zealand who attains that level.
Thank you, that's very useful. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks, Peggy. Lots of good recommendations there, I think that's the way to put them. But a couple I wanted to focus on the community. You talked about a cop on each corner in Japan. We used to have them here. They were called community police until about 3 years ago. So I'm basically asking whether that specific proposal to restore community policing in Hamilton and probably elsewhere around the country for that matter, but let's start in Hamilton like you are, could be specifically on the agenda?
No, we hadn't sort of thought of that. That's not to say that we wouldn't want to pursue it. I think that the purpose is to identify where people who in an emergency would have difficulty, how we do it. So we've identified that as a problem, and the police themselves and the civil defence have now taken it on board. And we will probably go and meet them. But this is the way we work. We motivate them. What a good idea. Okay, now it's your idea, do it.
But the problem now, if let's say someone has an emergency after about 6 p.m. at night, they'll ring and they'll get the North Call Centre in Auckland who'll dispatch someone who might be available. Probably the closest one might be Huntly to Hamilton or something like that. Seriously, it's an issue out of hours, even during the day in smaller towns and things like that. But in Hamilton, especially out of hours, without that sort of local community involvement of police.
Can I add it and put it first? on my list of good ideas from city councillors. Dave McPherson.
Thank you. And so I've got another good idea.
Okay.
Quick questions at this time, and then
Yeah,
you've got
no, I'm asking whether she
Brilliant.
agrees.
All right.
I do, it's on the list.
Yeah. You mentioned bus stops outside retirement villages, so my question's actually to management, because I think that is an excellent idea, but it's not specifically in our district plan. But could we, management, ask our transport people, when they're asked to comment on a resource consent application to build a retirement village, they twist arms of developers to actually install the wheelchair-friendly sort of access type of ones outside each retirement village, and if they're not on a route, they also contact a bus route. They also contact the regional council to see if that can be local route can be tweaked
Now,
specifically. Yeah.
Madam Chair, that is a beautiful example of how the steering committee works. You begin with the topic and they build on ideas, they identify who can do it, and we put it in our document.
Great. So,
A+.
thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
So,
Yeah.
Dave, your question was to staff. So what we'll do is get some feedback through the appropriate committee about what's happening with those accessible bus stops outside retirement areas, because we've talked about this for many years. Is that fine?
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
Are you finished?
Yep.
Thank you. Now we have Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, Peggy. That was really, really interesting. And you talked a little bit about, something about property, and I don't know whether I understood right, but I've seen quite a few clips from especially from Holland, from the Netherlands, what they do with aging population, and really great ideas coming out of that. Now, one of the questions I have, and I've got that for everywhere, it's families or everything, because the property developers today build just whatever they feel they want to build. Would you like to be involved more in having a say of how they should build things for older people?
Well, the Building Association, some of us have been at it for decades in introducing into the building code wider doorways for wheelchairs, and that's just normal practice now.
Okay.
And if it's not, you can complain. And also taps that you can operate with your elbow. Even small children can't do that. And so levers and so on. Yes, of course, I personally or professionally am interested, and so is the steering committee. But again, we give it over to the Building Association.
Right.
So I or some person on our steering committee will go and talk to them, as I am talking to the Retirement Villages Association. And they have to own the idea and do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But thank you for, again, I will write it down. We're talking about future-proofing buildings, and in the new developments that are going, and the new buildings that are going on in north of Hamilton, I would hope that they're not just being built for first homeowners, because eventually those people will get old, or somebody else will buy it.
Yeah. If they survive that long.
Yeah, that's
with new
right.
buildings.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor Gallagher.
Thank you.
Horrible glasses.
Just obviously, I wonder if you perhaps outline, because what I would hear is very clearly you will be having a lot of interconnections with, say, the District Health Board around some of the, and central government. So I guess what I'm trying to say, in the jigsaw puzzle, the council fits in a certain way, particularly around some of the physical connectedness, advocacy, etc., public transport.
Yes.
Would you perhaps give us a feel of the work that your group, you are doing, say, with District Health Board / central government, in terms of, for example, in terms of the checklist on our home help services, so that older Hamiltonians can stay in their own home as long as possible, those kind of things, and the adequacy or whatever of those kind of contracts, the kind of support around that.
Yes. If I can deal with the detail first, Councillor Gallagher, the Waikato District Health Board has an advisory group of older people which I chair and have for the last 8 years or so. And so there is direct, and in fact I have ordered the agenda so that they have age-friendly Hamilton on it every time. And we have on our steering group a person, Dale Hood, who was the previous medical director of Hamilton. So we're closely in contact. It's actually a little difficult because they have whole committees for older people and so on. So we're still sort of working on that one, if you don't mind. But it's certainly something that we have to work out. I recently visited, if I may say so, New York for 3 weeks. I have a son who lives there, and visited the New York age-friendly office. New York was the first city in the world to become age-friendly. It has 8 million people. We are barely at 200,000. I brought back lots of ideas from the New York age-friendly city, and one of the ideas is that their steering group works in partnership not only with the council, but it's big enough to have a mayor's separate office, 8 million people, but also the medical side of it. And so right now we're trying to work out how we might work on the steering group, perhaps much closer with the Waikato District Health Board. We have to also remember that we're focusing on Hamilton and not the Waikato, and we'll take little steps. And so I've got enough work as it is without trying to alter age-friendly sort of everywhere. However, we have a direct connection with central government. You asked about that. And so on Friday, I was in Maggie Barry's Office for Seniors, talking directly with them as to how they could help us. The short answer is they want to help us, but we have received no money or other help so far. We're hoping for it, that they will perhaps help us in some ways there. But it's because we're first, and we're sort of leading the way a little bit. The third one was the checklist. Yes, there is a checklist from the World Health Organization in all of the areas that we're talking about, and we are more or less systematically going through that and ticking off. For example, the areas are housing, social participation, buildings, accessibility, and so on. Now, does that sort of answer your question?
Yes, it does. I mean, I realise in terms of your scope and ability, even working with our surrounding Waipa and Waikato, because obviously we see particularly, you know, it could be some basic things like, you know, transport issues, and, you know, if you live in Te
You're quite right.
And I don't know, the scope-wise, if you are looking at potentially giving some assistance to those neighbouring councils in terms of advice.
Well, at the international level, this is one of the advantages of getting the status of Hamilton age-friendly city, because we have already benefited from some of the things in New York. For example, they have a process for picking up lost people who might be older, and I'm not going to go into the detail, but the point is that, again, the police and the civil defence have cooperated on that sort of thing. I think once you've got the idea, it's very easy to pass it on, that age-friendly is good for us all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of the questions, and we've got a recommendation from management, as you'll see, and we'll take some debate about that. I'm happy to move it. I was just going to ask one question. C suggests that we're going to continue to support the steering group. So I suppose that, just want to clarify, that's from a staff level. You haven't got a question, have you, Gary? For debate, okay. The support is working through the various streams of business that we currently do, and working alongside. Yeah, that's what that means. Yep. Okay. Yes. Thank you. So I've moved. Is there a seconder, Councillor Casson? I'll take some debate. Just before, because I've moved, I'll just quick. I'm only going to say a few words around this. Congratulations to you all for your hard work.
Thank you.
Certainly Hamilton's the richer for the huge number of hours that you all have put into this, and the great passion and experience that you bring. So thank you very much for that. Look forward to seeing your work. Councillor O'Leary made a good comment when she said that sometimes when plans are superseded, you can lose track of where you were going with those. So we very much hope that we will keep the eye on the ball in terms of the detail and interest to those things that Hamilton City Council can achieve to get the outcomes, because as you're quite right, and I'm one of those approaching that older segment of, well, that, you know, the last 8 holes at least in golfing terms. So 9. It's 9, isn't it? See, I don't play golf. But anyway, I'm on the home stretch there too. So I want to have a nice, safe city for all people. And as you're quite right, it's what's good for older people is good for those with other forms of disability and our young citizens as well. So great work. Thank you. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you, and thank you, Peggy, for the work you and your group have put into this. I have to, and you may or may not remember, I was a bit sceptical about this 2 years ago when it came up.
You're on my other list.
Pardon?
You're on my other list.
I'm on a lot of blacklists, yeah. But I'm heartened by what I've heard today. Primarily because more and more of the work is being done out of council. Now that has an economic benefit to council, which I applaud, but I actually think you'll do a better job, because instead of a bureaucratic model, we've got a organic model of people who are actually involved in the community, not within a bureaucracy up here. I would have said free market model, but I know that will lose some votes, so I'll call it an organic model, okay?
It's very green.
Which is, you can read into that free market, okay, so henceforth. So no, I'm very heartened by what I said, and I'm echoing what Paula said. We're all conflicted here, because we're all going to get there, aren't we, somewhere, we hope?
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Deputy Mayor Gallagher, thank you.
So I'll be supporting the proposed motion, but I also want to acknowledge the membership of the Age Friendly Steering Group, and it would be useful if we could arrange for the actual membership. I know you mentioned them to be circulated, because if you actually do a breakdown of who's on it, you have everything from people who've got, you know, without embarrassing the individual, former cabinet minister, former president of justice of the Federation of the Peace, people in the aged care sector, people in business, people in local government. Frankly, if you put these people round this table, they could probably do the job and run the city objectively, if you look at their CVs. So this is, I don't like the word heavy hitter, give me another term, but this is a group that has significant track record in our country, with national and local reputations. So I think, dare I say it, I think this particular model of advice and advocacy is actually a good one. Ironically, I partially agree with Councillor Mallett in terms of the organic, because I think the thing with this is you're not, dare I say it, beholden to council. That's a strength. Sometimes, respectfully, you will be critical of us as you might be of other agencies like District Health Board, and obviously you're proposing solutions. So I think as a go-to organisation for us, in terms of their connections with central government and particularly, is very, very important. And I want to acknowledge that, and certainly, Madam Chair, if we can have regular interaction and reporting, that will be very good. And obviously, thank you for the time you are all collectively giving this particular project. And that, I think, will be a great benefit for our city. Thank you.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. And yes, we will be hearing from this group later in the year when the plan is formed. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks. I agree with the points that Martin has made, but I think there is perhaps somewhere that this group might extend its gathering of intelligence from, because I'm aware that there's a number of quite active older persons groups based in community centres and some retirement villages in some cases that are quite active in thinking about community affairs, both as they affect them and as they affect the rest of the population. I think one of the things that a number of older people get irritated about is when people slightly younger, like us, think that they're only concerned about their own issues, but they're actually concerned about their grandchildren's issues as well. And we need to not forget that they might have good thoughts on kids' playgrounds and skate parks and things as well. So I just want that strand not to be lost, I suppose. The other thing I'd say is that I don't normally support plans that don't have resources attached to them. And Peggy made the point that this one, there aren't any resources currently with this plan, but I think the reason that I am supporting it is because the type of thinking that we're hearing expressed here is that it's a bit like what Gary's talking about, getting people who do have resources or are active in operational areas thinking about these issues and putting these issues, make sure they're covered off in their planning, in their operational work. And I think that's important, like the bus shelter one that we talked about before. So provided where that it's actually got some action attached, that itself has resources attached, then I think we're going to end up in the right place, which is why I support this thrust. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. I'm a new councillor, and I actually watched this discussion online in the last term.
Okay.
And I was very excited to see what happened as a result, so I'd like to, I know, I was the only one out of the building that actually watched it, but I was delighted and very excited by it, and because I believe that the future ain't what it used to be. So I would like to not only thank you for your great work, but also thank the previous council for opening the road for that work.
Yeah, that's right.
And as a new councillor who firmly believes that 60 is the new 40, I'm very, very proud to be an elected an official in a city where we have such a mobile and collegial group, so thank you, and I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. I like that, Mark. I'm going to use it. 60 is the new 40. Not quite there, but I'm looking forward to it. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, staff and Peggy, for your work in this area. You know, I've always been very supportive of this plan right from the start, and isn't it? It's a nice feeling today to have a different reception from this council. So I'm sure you appreciate that, because you've been under fire many times in the past, but you've handled it really well. I just wanted to, because we're not allowed to comment really in questions, I just wanted to point out on page 126, and I'm going to be making more of these points to this council as we head towards, I think Lance is smiling so he knows what I'm going to say. In regards to plans, they get a rough rap from this particular council, and as you know, I've been on working groups at a lot of those plans. This particular plan has spent nearly $500,000 of business as usual budget. So it's irresponsible to say that we don't fund our plans, because we do. And while there are some aspects of plans, and there are with this one, that are aspirational, many of them are these plans simply direct staff to spend their renewals budget and other items in the right way, and that the plan is a line in the sand that says when you go to do X, Y and Z, this is what this council has signed up for, and this is the direction of travel. So this plan has been successful, and staff have been very passionate about it, but I did want to make that political point that there's nearly $500,000 that has been spent to deliver actions in this plan through business as usual.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Casson.
Thank you, Peggy. Of course, I'm in support of this the plan. It was my previous job in the police and everything like that. I know that the cop on every street corner is the ultimate for everybody, just like Japan.
Yes, yeah.
But look, remember, you put enough pressure on stones to turn to diamonds. So I do strongly support you approaching police and keeping that pressure on them to get the community police back out there, because that's one of the goals as well of this council, to make the city as safe as possible. So good on you, and good on your group.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll go to voting now.
He's even telling him what you want to push.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you again to our visitors for the work that you've done and coming in and sharing with it with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your support.
Right, so that brings us on to the next item, which is an update on the Civil Defence Emergency Management on page 16 of the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We, just as Peggy asked, we have the Civil Defence team here now to talk with you. So this morning I'm going to have the Civil Defence team introduce himself, but beside me I have Lee Hazelwood. Lee is the Civil Defence and Emergency Management Group Manager from the Waikato Regional Council. He's also the Group Civil Defence Controller for the Waikato Region. Lee has a very esteemed background in emergency management. His origins are in the police force, both in the UK and in America, where he was also involved in counter-terrorism. He then has an extensive record in both private and government in terms of emergency management, including quite a senior role in the Boeing factory in Seattle, world's biggest building, 30-odd thousand employees, where he was heavily involved in the emergency management security for that particular site. So he brings an extremely strong resume to the table. Lee's been in the role with Regional Council for over 6 years, leading the emergency management team there, and the many improvements that he's made in terms of emergency management across the region. So in terms of Hamilton, last year the Council went through quite a comprehensive review process to look at our emergency management delivery mechanisms and concluded that a contracted model with the Regional Council Group Civil Defence was the appropriate way forward. That process and that contract started in October of last year, and this is the first report today from Lee on behalf of the team in terms of the work that they are undertaking with Hamilton City Council on emergency management. Kelvin Powell would be here today. Kelvin's the other controller for Hamilton City along with myself, and Kelvin is the line manager responsible for civil defence. But Lee and the team behind me here work as if they are Hamilton City Council employees, conducting the civil defence emergency management activities for Hamilton in the city. So I'll hand over to Lee. Before I do so, just one other comment. In the last 12 months, there's been a number of emergencies across the country, and that's led to a heightened interest in emergency management from both the public and the government. And overnight, an email has come out from Local Government New Zealand to certainly the chairs and mayors across the country, outlining a task force that's been set up by the government to look at various aspects of emergency management. Their focus is looking at things such as how the chain of command works in emergency management, how information flows between the public and government officials and ministers and the emergency management teams, and also the capability and capacity to deliver responses in the case of emergencies. And I guess this has been driven by things such as Christchurch earthquakes, the Kaikoura earthquake, the Edgecombe floods, the Port Hill fires. So in many ways, our decision of Hamilton to engage with Lee and his team places Hamilton in a really robust position in terms of whatever changes may occur in terms of civil defence to the future. We have sought to find a best practice model, and I absolutely believe that we have the best practice model in terms of working with Lee and his team. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Lee, who's going to take you through a few slides and talk to civil defence in the last 3 or 4 months.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. Mayor. I've been asked today to talk a little bit about the context of civil defence in this area, to introduce you to your new team members, and also just to talk a little bit about vision for the future and where we hope to go with civil defence, and obviously to answer some of your questions. You've been provided quite a detailed agenda item. We're not going to go through that page by page, you'll be pleased to hear. We provided that to provide you some context basically on civil defence and to give you a little bit of background as to why we are doing what we're doing today. But primarily we can take that as read. I wish to really talk about the current issues of civil defence from this point. So, firstly, to talk about civil defence in the Hamilton area, I just want to give everybody a little bit of an update on where we are and what the current hazards are. So, firstly, when you look at a city, it's inevitable conversation is going to come up regarding the fault line that's been is being researched around the Hamilton area. I'm going to park that for now because it's really ongoing research and we don't really have any proof either way at this point. So we'll park that natural hazard. I can't talk to it really until that's concluded. What I really want to talk about is the more obvious issues that are evident to most people. And that is Hamilton, most of the hazardous materials that come out of Auckland come through Hamilton, whether they be by rail or by road. You have a situation where you have a fairly unique situation, actually, where you have a railway track that goes under the city centre, underneath your largest shopping precinct, and also a large accommodation block, as well as some hotels. Should you have a derailment in that tunnel with the large quantities of hazardous materials that go over to Tauranga, we could be faced with a bit of a situation. In addition, you have a lot of road-borne chemicals coming through the centre of town, ironically, for those that can't sleep at night, are going across railway tracks. In addition, you have obviously the growing number of flood events, and with the changes in global warming, it's fairly evident that we're going to be facing more and more of those sort of flood events. When you look at some of the pictures, like the one up on the top right-hand corner from Hamilton, we're not talking about minor few inches anymore on some of your roads. We're talking about some significant flash flood issues, as well as those that are impacted by increases of water in the river. And then we have some of the issues to do with infrastructure that we didn't necessarily have to face before, with river erosion and such, like the event recently with the main water supply, bulk water supply, and the fact that it's in a situation where it's at greater risk at the moment than it has been possibly in the past. And then also the fact that Hamilton is a growing city. There is more industry. Along with industry comes the risk of greater hazardous materials and other issues. So parking the natural risks, even from a man-made perspective, Hamilton does have things there that could be of concern to us from a civil defence perspective. When we start looking further afield, though, one of the things I really should put into context, the risks to, by the way, when people ask me what I do for a living, I say I'm a professional doom and gloom artist. So take this in the context of what the presentation is. I don't want anybody not sleeping tonight. When we talk about what the risks are to Hamilton, the reality is Kaikoura is 530 kilometres from here, and Kaikoura resulted in the Raglan water supply being shut down. It resulted in fact, one of my colleagues sitting behind me has a swimming pool where up to a third of the water supply left his swimming pool because it was sloshed out. That's something 530 kilometres away. If you put that more in perspective with what we've got just outside of Hamilton, your nearest fault line is only 40 kilometres away. So if you think about what Kaikoura did to this region, think about what one of those closer earthquake lines. So park anything right under Hamilton. Just think about what we have got out there and we do know about. So both Hauraki Plains and north of Hamilton, we have fault lines. And there's an awful lot of fault lines between here and Kaikoura. In addition, of course, we do have some of the concerns regarding ashfall from Tongariro, but those northerly winds are fairly rare, but there is a possibility. In addition, though, to the realities of what's the direct impact to Hamilton, it's also the role that Hamilton has to play in the bigger picture. Hamilton is the largest urban area. It is where the majority of resources that can help others is based. So Hamilton not only needs to be prepared from its own challenges, it needs to be prepared to support our neighbours, whether those be our immediate neighbours, such as those within the Waikato region. For those not aware, we're part of a collective group, which is all 11 councils to include the regional council of the Waikato region. And collectively, we are obligated to support each other during an emergency. So just by way of example, some of the pictures that you can see up there now, the top left picture is the Hauraki, which is still under significant amounts of water at the moment. Also the landslides we faced on the Coromandel and recently the Waikato area, and on a lesser extent Otahonga and Waitomo. We have the events of Kaikoura, which we supported from this area with a number of our senior staff, and also of course Edgecombe, which we sent significant resources from this area from all councils to support not too long ago. So we're not only preparing for city and its immediate threats, but also its obligations to support others. I should point out that it's a mutual aid thing as well, where it's not all one way. The thoughts being if we have a major event, of course, support will be coming in from the other area as well. So what I'd like to do now is just introduce you, now I've scared you all to death. Now I want to do is talk to you about the team that's going to save the day, as it were. One of the members isn't here today. He's actually on leave. Apparently from his photograph, this is the first job he got after leaving prison. But this is Andy Boubert. But I'll introduce the other members and we'll come back to Andy. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Julian Snowball. Julian, step forward. So Julian is our team leader within the Group Emergency Management Office. Would you just like to introduce yourself, Julian? No.
Tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm Julian Snowball, as Lee's just introduced myself. What I'll do first of all, if you don't mind, because I'll introduce Andy. Andy works for me. As Lee said, he's in Samoa at the moment. So Andy joined us this month. He's a huge asset to the team after 31 years in policing, having joined the Ministry of Transport Police in 1986, transferred to the New Zealand Police in 1992, and since 1992 he has worked in a number of roles, also being deployed overseas to East Timor as a UN policing commander, family violence background, not personally, but that's what I used to investigate, criminal investigation background, and more importantly for us, in recent years where he got involved with civil defence, he was the strategic planning manager for New Zealand Police in the Waikato region, and brings a lot of skills, including experience of planning for the recent Cricket World Cup, the FIFA Under-21s, I think it was, World Cup, a number of royal tours to the area, and to conclude his service, he was the senior sergeant, the manager at Roads Policing here in the Waikato, just to go full circle back to his Ministry of Transport days. So Andy comes to us with a wealth of experience. He's with us for 20 months on a fixed-term contract, looking at our policies and our plans for civil defence. And he'll be a great asset to you as a council and the people of Hamilton generally. My own background, I've been here at the Waikato region for 3 years. Again, I come from a military and a police background. I was in the Air Force, and after serving 4 years in the Air Force, I joined the police in the UK. I was an advanced public order commander. I was unfortunate enough to be involved in a number of spontaneous riots in the UK. And I was also fortunate enough to be involved in the planning and the delivery of some significant policing events for far-right demonstrations and counter left-wing demonstrations and big football matches such as Manchester United and Manchester City derbies, and none of those went wrong. So that's why I'm fortunate enough to have been involved in those. So yeah, that's pretty much me. I've been here 3 years, and I was one of those people sent to Kaikoura, and I've also been deployed to places like Wanganui. So I bring that New Zealand experience back to the office that I hope to share and hopefully not benefit Hamilton, because you won't need it. But if it does happen, I bring that experience.
Thank you.
What Julian failed to modestly point out there, he's also an acting superintendent. So next I'd like to introduce Chris Hatting, for those who have been around for a while. Chris should be a familiar face. Chris?
Morning, councillors and Madam Chair. For those who don't know me, I'm Chris Hatting. I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator for Operational Readiness. Been involved in Waikato for the last 7 years in operational readiness. I've seen the growth that has taken place. That's why I didn't jump ship when changes took place. Stayed on board because I know we're navigating in the right direction. And also just to point out to you, we've got Hamilton's community at heart, and we've got civil defence at heart. Therefore, we proud wearing our badges on our heart. I also come with military experience and local government and central government experience. Been involved in disaster management, basically my whole life, and also with Lifeline Utilities at councils, looking at council assets and also being part of the various committees that ensure that service delivery takes place. I moved over from South Africa to New Zealand. First job was at Rotorua in the engineering department, designing council infrastructure and ensuring construction supervision and project management takes place. Where I also joined the search and rescue team there as the safety officer, and then I relocated to Hamilton because of opportunity with the Waikato Valley Emergency Operating Area, where we took care of Hamilton also as part of the job. I had the opportunity to be involved with training of various stakeholders in civil defence, and the growth there was magnificent. At this stage, I've been involved with Red Cross also in the disaster welfare response teams and that. And then, not the least to say is, at least I've got the vision. Going forward is to ensure that Hamilton becomes a centre of excellence in emergency management and that we live up to the claim that we are the most resilient city in New Zealand. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So Chris's background, particularly his council experience, is the biggest asset to us. We've got a lot of response experience on the team, so has Chris, but his background in specifically with his council is a tremendous asset. Justin.
Tēnā rā koutou katoa e raurangatira mā. Kei te mihi mō tā koutou mahi I tēnei wā. Kia ora mai koutou. My name is Justin Douglas and I come from Waikato Tainui. So it's a passion for me to be here, especially before you and to have listened to the speak before. So what I said to you at the beginning is I addressed you as rangatira, chiefs, because of the position that you hold. When I'm out there, I also refer with the other community, with all of the people in the community as rangatira, because we never know what it is, where the leaders are going to come from, and they have to retain what it is that they're doing for us to go forward. We can't be just the experts because they're the experts in how it is that they're going to manage their emergencies. My background and my role at the moment is community engagement. That's where I come from. I'm a trained career counsellor, AOD counsellor, youth worker. I've worked with youth at risk, I've worked with families who are trying to do better in some of the most vulnerable communities in this country. I've worked next to the Prime Minister's office with different roles in being able to help with their community engagement, and it's where my heart and passion is. I have brought together the likes of wonderful people to lead, such as on this side, when you walk into a hall, if you can imagine all blue being the police, and on this side being the mongrel mob, all in red. And it was myself and colleagues that brought them together in Porirua. The outcome of that being that we had a lot of young people, up to 400 young people at night time with weapons in what they call the basin in Porirua. That was something that really needed to be sorted out. Together with that leadership, we were able to do a joint program which resulted in actually the council coming on board to be able to support the program, which is called the Midnight Express, which is where we have youth workers going out at night time, being able to talk to those kids and get them home. If you can imagine driving along with a van and picking them up, putting them in the car, giving them a feed. After they've had a feed, they're tired, leave the weapons in the car and drop them all off at home. Sounds simple, but having the collaboration is where it's at. So my role of community engagement within civil defence, within the Hamilton City Council, I hold passion with that, and as I'm getting out there and talking to the communities, we're talking about what's important to put in your bag. What are you going to be putting in your bag? And a lot of people, parents will say to the kids when we say, what are you going to put in your little bag? And the kids say, my dinosaurs and my Lego and my homework books and my book that I like to read. And the parents will say, no, it's supposed to be water, it's supposed to be food. And I say, no, it's whatever's important to them, because at a time of trauma, if you can't be at home, our kids need those things to be able to hold on to. So it's imparting that knowledge, but also sharing the knowledge that they have for their experiences. Finally, I suppose my history, as my teammates have talked about theirs, my history is I've talked about my qualifications. I've also worked within the oil companies in emergency management and looking at mitigation for risks with reporting on IT systems and also within the oil spills field and environmental. Kia ora koutou.
Megan, who's the other individual, is the administrator, isn't available today, but likewise, she comes with a good background. I should point out that Justin is probably the most modest individual I've ever met, and it's taken me 3 days to get him to share that amount of information with you. So I appreciate that, Justin. So as you can see, collectively, the team that's been put together should serve Hamilton well in the future. Andy Boubert is a temporary position primarily intended to allow the two individuals, Justin and Chris, to get out there and get on with the job and start moving things forward, while Andy can be putting together both the new plans that need to be done and also the modifications to the existing plans. Most importantly, though, behind this arrangement is the supporting team that goes along with it. In addition to those 5 individuals that are working, or the 4 individuals that are working dedicated on HCC supported by Julian, you've also got quite a support team behind them. So the rest of the group management team is laid out as you have on your org chart there. They have a number of specialists or technical staff members who focus on the delivery of welfare at a strategic level. We have training and exercise specialists. We have individuals who are engaged on the social media and the public information side of the house. And in addition, we have a strategic planning person. In addition, they are backed up by the position you see in orange, which is a public information manager. It's a WRC resources that's dedicated to the broader group, along with 2 team leaders and myself. In addition, the individual that you can see in green is Waikato District Council's dedicated resource. That person is now a member of your overall response team. So in the duty officer rotation, it's not only the 4 staff that are dedicated to you, it's also the Waikato District Council staff member. They all rotate together, providing you 24-hour coverage. So the main advantage of this arrangement is that bigger picture, the support network behind you. What I'd like to talk about now is the new Emergency Operations Centre, which, all being well, should be online by will be online by December 15th. That's the drop-dead date I've been given, hopefully before that time. Obviously, this is an ideal time because integrated with that centre is also the City Safe cameras, so we'd obviously want them to be in place before the Christmas period, ideally. The whole facility might not be online by December 15th, but at least the business as usual operational areas will be. The emergency operations area might be coming on and the training rooms might be coming on in the January time frame, but Foster's is working with us to try and bring that forward as much as possible. So in general terms, I've laid it out in the report there, but this is a facility on Bry Street. It is, I believe it used to be a Food Town or something, yeah, Food Town store. The Food Town stores now make up 100-person, I believe it's 100-person call centre for the Genesis Energy, but now attached onto the front of that facility is an IL4 or Importance Level 4 building. Now, just to clarify what the difference is between IL1 and IL3 versus IL4. IL1 through 3 is talking about building safety for the survival of people in a building should there be something like an earthquake or another major event. The difference with an IL4 is it's not only the survivability of people in the building, it's the ability to continue normal operations through an event. And that's a huge difference. So it's not just about us all being able to run out in safety, it's being able to actually carry on and continue to manage whatever event is taking place. It's got a lot of redundancy built into it. So, for example, it has multiple IT lines coming in, multiple power lines, in addition to a power generator backup. It has septic tank reserves. So the building can operate offline for at least a few days, possibly longer, before we have to rely on those normal city services again. And then, of course, the building is seismically strong. The building is also the control room for Genesis Energy, along with its various different support offices. So the alignment, obviously Genesis is already a partner of ours. They're part of our Lifelines group, which is all of the providers of the various different lifeline sources. However, we've worked on an effort to integrate with CitySafe and the Transport Operations Centre. What this opens up for us is a term, it's a bit of a buzzword nowadays, but situational awareness, which means those who are in a position to coordinate or manage a major operation needs to know exactly what's going on in the field and as quickly as possible. That's very challenging to do during a disaster. Now, at least from the city's perspective, we have access to the cameras, so we can see through the cameras what's going on. In addition, the Transport Operations Centre allows us to look at all the traffic cameras, which I believe over time is meant to be expanding beyond just the city, but to a lot of the other NZTA roads around the region. This is a huge advantage to the likes of myself as a controller, and also to the Hamilton City Controller, my alternate controller sitting behind me, Julian Snowball. It means we get information, immediate information from the field. In addition, we have access now to the fire system, when we will be leaning forward and seeing if we can get access also to the ambulance, and possibly some restricted access to the police system. So what this allows us to do is instantaneously see all of the calls that are going on around the area, and also to be able to visibly see them on cameras as well. This is a huge step forward as far as integrated emergency response. In addition, it also means that we can borrow resources from one another. One of the hardest things for an event is to staff all those key positions in a coordinated incident management system or in an emergency operations centre. Well, we have resources. We have the resources of those staff within CitySafe possibly, or even those working in a TOC if they're not dealing with their own issues. In addition, there's also the fact that we have shared resources, just even simple things like sharing peripherals like printers help reduce those costs over time. Obviously, the establishment fee is a little bit more, but over time, as you share the resources, those costs come down and there's greater efficiencies. So the other aspect of the building I really should point out is on the map there, the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see some light blue areas. The left-hand side, or the one right in the centre, if you like, is what we refer to as a hot EOC, or a hot operational area. What that means is we can respond instantaneously. There's no dragging furniture in, there's no dragging computers in and bringing staff together like we typically have to do in an incident. This room is fully operational 24 hours, and should anything occur, we can walk in and get straight on with the job. It's a limited number of staff positions, but it's all we require to get on with the initial event. Over to the right, the other two rooms are actually training rooms, which we hope to have, after the first year, fully utilised by ourselves and our partner agencies related to emergency management. That might be ourselves, it might be the police, it might be fire, it might be Lansar, it might be Red Cross. But what those rooms allow us is, if we need to expand our emergency operations centre, we can simply slide back the walls and move in. We can't justify to the ratepayer having a large EOC that we might never use, but we certainly can justify having training rooms, which we will be using all the time, plus a hot EOC, but we have the ability to instantaneously expand our capability if we have it. Now, comparison here might be the RENA event. You may or may not know, but they actually had to move EOC 3 times during RENA. As soon as they set up one EOC, they realised they were outgrown it and had to find a second location. And then they had to find a third location, until eventually they had up between 300 to 400 staff operating out of the EOC. With the setup that we have here, without having to spend money on a facility, like I said, which might be standing idle, we can expand quite rapidly to increase our numbers if needs be. I think that's probably all I need to cover on that actual facility.
Yes, so if we could, it'd be good to just allow a little bit of time for questions, because I do see a couple up there, and you'll take questions on the attachment as well. You know, like you said, you weren't going to go through it entirely, but there are some interesting bits and pieces in there. Is that? And you know, thank you very much for your presentation. I've been involved in a previous role with your work, so it's really good to see the bricks and mortars going up now, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
All right, questions. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. Really exciting stuff. I was just scrolling through the Facebook page. I love your cartoonist, by the way. Fantastic. And please, can you keep them on? Who is that?
We've had a number, and we're trying to get more of the team trained, but we have one individual at the moment who's called Drew.
Right.
Who does most of the work on that.
Appropriate.
Yeah.
Drew.
He's not the original one, though, is he? Because we had an original one who designed that whole way of communicating through cartoons, who moved on, but
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That individual was
Have you guys all seen that? The Facebook page is stunning.
Yeah.
It's done for the purposes, by the way, of just trying to engage with a broader audience as possible. We switch from the humour during a major event.
Yeah,
I can assure you.
You're funny, that. Yeah, good. My question is actually around the bridges, because you were identifying the hazardous goods coming through and flooding, which strikes me as the hot point is the bridges. What are the procedures involved in that? Because if the bridges went down, we'd be stuffed.
Yeah. Just off the top of my head, I believe there's 9 bridges in all when you actually look further afield in the city itself. So we do fortunately have quite a bit of redundancy. Hamilton's in a good spot as far as that's concerned. So even if the bridges, so for example, after an earthquake or even after a major event, would be inspected by engineers as city engineers as a priority. But we do have other places, alternative routes to get over should we actually need it.
Okay, cool. And is our it used to be a down point about Hamilton that nothing ever happens here, and now it's actually seems to be a major selling point. Is that actually drawing more attention from around the country regards to your services?
Yeah,
Well, geographical safety, basically.
Yeah, I'll add some context to my further scaremongering earlier. I do really like to put that into context after the fact. The reality is Hamilton is still one of the safer cities. In fact, comparatively to the rest of New Zealand, it's in a good place. I'll be foolhardy to turn around and say you're risk-free because you're not. But you're certainly, in comparison, far better off than most other places, and that makes it particularly attractive. And one of the things I'm very keen to promote is the more coordinated and organised your civil defence capability along with your emergency services, the more attractive you are to the insurance companies of those businesses that are looking to move in here.
Good point. Thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. Thanks, Lee. Couple of questions. We don't have sirens, do we? And this has always been a question that's floated around there. So in an emergency, the dam breaks or something, we don't have sirens. So we're not going to ever have sirens, and why?
Sirens have been considered on coastline issues for rapid evacuation, but here in the city, the reality is there's a lot of people, there's a lot of resources which we can communicate. Ideally on a national level, we will have one day a national system where we can press one button and alert. But at the moment, when you talk about urban areas, there's a lot of other mechanisms to get the word out rapidly. I will just make one point on the dam. You'll notice I didn't mention that earlier on the hazards. When you start looking at the risk factors, it's very, very low down on the risk for 2 reasons. One, if you look at all the structures that are built in New Zealand, dams are probably to the highest specifications. For a very good reason, because of the critical infrastructure of the country. And secondly, you actually have quite a delay time between here and that dam. So should it break, we would have plenty of time to actually evacuate people. So.
Okay.
Just sorry, Angela, just one comment. The Minister of Civil Defence has certainly commissioned a project to look at cell phone technology in terms of alerting systems. So, Lee, I don't know whether you just want to...
Yeah, it was.
It's not quite as easy as one would imagine. They are making progress on that. We're all quite excited. We do have some apps in the meantime. We have the Red Cross app, which has been well received and we're promoting across the country at the moment. But just one issue with the phones is even if you get the technology in place, it's not necessarily switched on in the phone. It's not something you can press a button and turn it on. It usually has to come from the manufacturers. So once it's implemented, it may take some time because there'll be a natural turnover of people buying new phones, which, as you know, it's not usually an annual event. So it could be a while before we get it. But in the meantime, we do have the likes of the Hazard app.
So I live over on the west of the city, and I wouldn't say often, but maybe 3 times a year hear a siren. Is it? I know it's not the Volunteer Fire Brigade because they're over in Puketi. So what is that siren?
What you may have heard actually, one of the dairy companies, and Chris Fonterra, they've had an alarm go off several times for different reasons. It causes all sorts of...
And it sounds like a siren.
Yeah, it actually is a siren, and we've received calls asking us is the Third World War started, and it's actually related to that.
Okay, I did wonder that. We haven't always had Justin's position, have we? Community engagement?
No.
And I'm really thrilled to hear that because our subcommittee for civil defence last term, chaired by Councillor Tooman and Councillor McPherson and I were on that. We talked a lot about that community engagement, so I'm absolutely thrilled that that position has been created because I actually do sometimes think about this late at night and get a bit anxious around how our community would respond, and you know, the fact that we've got people's lives in our hands does concern me. So that's fantastic. Are we still surveying? Do we survey as a region in response to civil defence? Do we survey our people on a regular basis to find out their readiness, or is that something that's done nationally?
The Colmore-Brunton report comes out nationally,
Okay.
but we do. Some of the councils have asked at least one question on the surveys that go out regarding civil defence. We did have a discussion recently that we'd like that question to be standardised, so we could actually run some metrics. If you
So
like.
it would just be one question, would it? I mean,
possibly.
you couldn't say, how ready are you? Because
yeah, it's a very general question, and
yeah.
typically people say, yes, I'm very ready, when in fact the questions more should be along the lines of, do you have this? Which gives us a more clear indication as to whether they're ready or not.
Yeah, okay. Another thing that's always concerned me, and I did it with the Whitiora school kids, and Blair know what I'm talking about, is that, and perhaps an opportunity when the building's open, I'm assuming elected members are going to have a little tour.
Oh,
that's
down
outstanding. Like, this is fantastic. Is our response in our role, which is nothing really, in the event of an emergency, and the little training thing that we did when the office was here, that I took, this was amazing, and it really gave me a complete understanding of what happens. I mean, it blows your mind. It was so organised. So I have this other worry that should something significant happen, you've got, I mean, the mayor put aside because he takes control, but you've got 12 elected members ringing you up and panicking, and because the community would expect that we would know what was going on. So I think it's mandatory that we go through. It was only an hour. It was outstanding.
So, Angela,
Can we do that when we, at some point this year? Like, it really worries me.
yes, absolutely. We have it noted on the council workshop schedule as an item to schedule in. So, absolutely.
That actual going through and seeing how amazing the response is, and then moving from response to recovery.
Yes, I think it's very much around helping elected members understand their role in an emergency.
Yeah.
What would happen, how you would be engaged, and how you could also support the emergency team, because there is a role for elected members there, but it's also understanding your role and how you can best help, as opposed to not try and get involved in the detail. And
Yeah.
we certainly want to take that through. So what I wanted to allow was Lee and his team to get up and get established, and we'll now put something into the schedule for the second half of the year.
Yeah, okay.
There is actually a date provided, 25th, was it? I believe the 25th, there was an invite went out to councillors for some training regarding the media. I'll have that sent out again if you're interested and available, but certainly we will be running those training sessions again, particularly for dedicated to staff, dedicated to councillors for this council. And I will just say that in the past, as a sector as a whole, we've not done a very good job of advising councillors. So we'd always get up and complain afterwards that, the councillors were talking to the public and they were telling them something different than what we were telling.
Right.
Well, that was our fault because we weren't communicating with councillors. So we will be making it be a lot more conscientious in that area, where we will be advising you, and we probably avoid trying to do it for each and every one of you, but we'll find some kind of mechanism, because at the end of the day, you are our mouthpiece to the community, so we want to make sure we're all saying and speaking to the same
and the
way.
last thing we would want to be in an emergency is to feel useless, and we don't want to be doing that.
It's definitely a role.
And so, I think it's probably in the report, but this centre, is this unique? Is this the first one in New Zealand like this, dedicated?
There is,
site-specific?
Christchurch is developing a combined centre with the police called the Justice Precinct, but they've engaged lots of other parties. It's useful in the fact it's brought the emergency services together, but it doesn't engage, for example, the City Safe cameras and the Transport Operations Centre. So for your perspective, particularly from the smart city approach, you've got everything integrated in a facility that's going to stand the test of time. So that is, I would say, probably unique.
Yeah, and then when it's all completed, how many staff will be in there on a day-to-day basis?
Probably around about 25 to 28 staff, with the capability of absorbing a lot more, of course.
Yeah, and final question. People will eventually find out where this is. Are you, in the event of an emergency, would you expect people to rock up? Because I know we've got Claudelands is our main recovery centre, response centre, whichever one you call it. But would you expect people to turn up here, and what would happen if they did?
Absolutely no.
Okay, but in a real life situation, you guys know this more than I do, people would know that's there.
Yep.
This will be reported in the media, this is a great story. They turn up there, and then what happens? They get turned away?
They'll find a locked door and probably a bunch of burly city safe people outside, and possibly some police officers as well. So the EOCs, it's not an area where we'll be receiving the public. That said, we'll be always setting up something else, such as a welfare centre, to receive the public.
So I'm just, and you know, I'm thinking from Joe Public on the street, panics, something's happening in the CBD, buildings falling down. People know this is there, they turn up. The response to deal with them is what?
We'll put some kind of communication out there. We'll be foolhardy just to stand there and say, go away.
You can't just say, don't come in,
yeah.
go away.
So what we probably have is what we call a PIM, Public Information Manager, or one of them based there to give people some kind of advice. And once we had enough time, we'd probably roll in some kind of information board where we can just direct. We don't want the officers standing there explaining things over and over again. We'll simply be referring them to some other source of information.
Angela, just to give you some comfort, currently the team have identified 2 major locations, welfare centres. Clauden's is one, Waikato Stadium being the other. Right. Both have high levels of redundancy, modern buildings, a number of facilities, so they can handle a large number of people in an event type situation.
So Blair, just final question, just on that, I remember in the subcommittee we talked a lot about, you know, the good old days when schools had the signs outside with civil defence, and the country was moving away from those signs because you don't want people to rock up to schools anymore. You want them to go to these big welfare areas. So I'm assuming the signs have been removed, but I think we'd be struggling to get half of, 5 out of 10 people in Hamilton understanding where those 2 welfare centres are.
Yeah, so the approach has changed slightly. For 2 reasons where we don't want people to go to schools, because the contemporary research has said that the community needs the schools operational as fast as possible. That's what keeps communities together. People can go back to work for starters because the children are looked after. So last thing we want to do is put 200 people sleeping on the floor of the gyms and the classrooms. So we're trying to move away from that. We have 2 large welfare centres established with lots of redundancy and capability for large-scale events. But the reality is we're going to have possibly some smaller events. So in addition, there are other civil defence centres identified. Those are not identified to the public or not released to the public until the time of the event. And the reason being is that we don't want somebody going to a centre which is actually potentially at risk, i.e. it's downwind of hazardous material, or it's not structurally sound after an earthquake and we might have aftershocks. So what would happen is we would select the most appropriate out of our databases of welfare areas, and then let the public know where those are located. But the days of saying it's always going to be that building over there, that's potentially very dangerous, because we can actually be sending those people into harm's way.
And then at the time of an emergency, how do we, say power's down and everything, how do we tell people where those 2 centres are?
Yeah, so obviously we have the phone apps, but those only work if the communication's there. If not, we start looking at the approaches such as using Christchurch, lots of different things. For an example is, if people are looking for water, the best place to put all your communications is large posters on the side of the water tankers, which is what we did to communicate. There's also PAs in all of the fire trucks, police trucks, emergency response vehicles. So there is still channels to communicate that out, and at the end of the day, the most effective one is still word of mouth in an urban area.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Mallett.
Thank you, Lee. You talked before about the way we communicate during a civil defence emergency. I assume we know we'll never get hold of everyone. So what advances have we made? For example, I'm a member of AA, have been since 1990. This is out of my card. They send out texts to me regularly about all sorts of things. Has the civil defence community engaged with these private sector type things that have big databases, which you could just, and there's no privacy issue, and they've got it there already. So, I've got no idea how many people have got the AA, get on AA's things, but there'll be other organisations like that will have huge databases of text, phone numbers that they could text to. Have you looked at that avenue?
Yeah, so we're working on something called a common alerting protocol.
Yeah.
One of the challenges of having multiple different places is that somebody's got to sit there and contact multiple different places. So the common alerting protocol is something that's been worked at a national
So hang on,
level.
so sorry, just what you're saying that you're saying it's going to be hard to send a text to the AA, please send this out to your people, send a text to whatever, something else.
It's not impossible. The reality is
Well,
we're trying to...
it would be one of the easiest things to do in the world, wouldn't it?
Well, we also use Fonterra database for the likes of trying to identify all the farms. We have identified a multitude of databases with our Lifelines organisations, welfare. We are going to reach out to all of those, but we would like to reach out to all of those, but that takes time.
But hang on, why does it take time?
Well, somebody's got to contact them, but the purpose...
So you, first of all, you have to say, in the event of this, you have a discussion now before the earthquake or the fire, in the event of such and such, may we do that? And they'll say yes. Well, I assume they'll say yes. I don't know, but or is it when the emergency's happening?
Oh no. We're reaching out to those organisations now.
Should have been something.
One of a good example is I've forgotten the name of the database now, but there's a tool that's used for camp events.
Yep. Okay. I don't need to know who all the organisations are, but the concept is. I would suggest you should be going out to all these people and say, and you're never going to get, we're never going to get 4 million people's cell phones, but you're going to get enough people so that I can tell this bloke and that bloke and things like that.
Where I was going with the comment, I'm not discounting those, Councillor. That's absolutely where we're going to go. In fact, we have done. What I'm trying to say is by using what's called a common alerting protocol, as we ring on more, we press one button and it goes out to all of them instantaneously. So that's what we're working on at the moment, once everybody's brought into that. The organisations, as I said, the camper van one was during the event, we were able to reach out and tell everybody, hey, stay off to Coromandel, worked out, practically all the camper vans turned around and left. So yes, we're trying to engage with as many of those organisations, and most of them are already engaged with us through our Lifelines and welfare organisations.
So could you do that now? Could you, if there was a emergency, could you hit a third of the population to say, stay away from such and such, or make your way away, get away from the water?
We're trying to build on that through as many different channels as possible, and we're getting more and more all the time. I couldn't give you the statistic. That's one of the reasons we're actually working out using Facebook, because we've identified that as being one of our audiences, which is the hardest one to reach out to.
So if I might, I'm suggesting that because we know there's going to be some training for councillors, plus a visit to the site at some point, this might be a chance. We might be able to get into one of those education rooms and really thrash all of that detail out and get a thorough understanding. We're just running over time a little bit with this item, so I've got if you've got another question, Gary, or
that's cool. That's it.
Councillor Tooman's got one, and I've got one very quick one. Councillor Tooman.
To Blair. Blair, the capability score I noticed is 44% at the present time. I thought last time around we were in the 70s.
Yes, we were, Leo. So that was something that we were very conscious of at the time when we commenced the review. We had lost some key staff in Hamilton, and that was part of the risk that we identified through that process, that our capability was very quickly declining. And ultimately, the reason why I recommended council agreed to engage Lee's team was actually so that we could then have a far more sustainable resource, which would ensure our capability didn't drop. So we've gone and got a very robust assessment. It's put our current activity at 44%, but you can see with Lee's team the capability we have acquired, and very quickly I'm very confident that we will get our assessment back up. But we wanted a baseline because we wanted to be able to also assess the performance of Lee's team against the current state.
And then I noticed on the training of staff for operating an EOC, 64 are now trained, with another 13 in the intermediate level. We were over 100 at one stage. Is that because of the new structure?
There's natural turnover of staff, and it's something that with training in these events or in this area, you constantly need to keep on top of it. So things are changing rapidly, and so we now have a program to get a number of staff back through that training. So that 64 will increase to around 100, and certainly those staff have been trained since the start of this year. So it's been quite a rapid program of achievement in the training area.
And just one final one is perhaps Lee, I know you attended one of our civil defence meetings last time, and you told us how to put the Red Cross app on. Dave did it within a couple of seconds, and took me about a couple of months. But I've got it now, yeah. But that's great, because every time there's a major weather event and that sort of stuff, the phone goes ping, you open it up, and there it is. So perhaps, Dave, you could show some of the councillors during the break as to how to do it.
I'd be happy to do so.
Just one very short question from myself, if I might, on page 23 of your of the attached item around the community response plan. Justin might want to comment on that too. I just highlighted the bit that was talking that some of the existing community plan is generic and not necessarily suited to local communities. And then I noticed that the 2 paragraphs down, you suggest that council members are in a good position to identify community-based cultural alignments, geography, demographics, and so on, and that we should become involved with the CDEMG team in that respect. Can you talk about what the next step of that is then? Is how we do to tweak that community plan so it's more relevant for Hamilton? How do we help you with that?
Yeah, so Justin is actually engaged at the moment in going out and targeting the priority communities, and some of those were mentioned earlier, the elderly and the disabled communities. We've already made some progress. And once we start moving towards the broader communities, that's when it becomes a bit more challenging to identify what truly is a community. And that's, as I've noted there, that's when we'll be actually reaching out to you. So Justin will contact you as councillors and ask, in your area, is there any clearly defined communities? And if not, we'd expect to probably work on a little bit of a workshop with you to try and identify what is a community. It's not quite as easy as people would imagine, because we need a community which is going to be sustainable over the long term as a community, so we can target them, as opposed to something that lasts 6 months and then becomes something else.
So it sounds timely that a workshop might be developed and encapsulate this all in.
Yes.
Yeah, perhaps. Okay, thank you. Okay, Council. We're going to put the recommendation. It's only that the report be received, and we've had quite a lot of debate, so unless councillors have got any new comments to make, we might avoid a lot of commentary, but anybody prepared to remove the receipt of the report? Councillor Henry, Councillor Bunting, sorry, I saw your hand in the peripheral. All those in... anybody want to talk to it?
Madam Chair, if I could just raise one matter just briefly before you take the vote. It's just foreshadowing to the council meeting at the start of June. I will be bringing a short report just on the approved contract, some relating to the wider civil defence, including the building. There have been some cost changes with regards to the fit-out costs of the building. As you can imagine, it's been a very complicated build. So just foreshadowing, we can accommodate that within the existing budgets, but I do need to increase the contract sum relating to the tenure of the contract around the building. So just it's just in line with the positive comments of the building, there has just been some additional costs that we need to capture in the contract. So.
Okay, thank you very much. That's good to know. And thank you very much for the good work. Well, I think the 3 things that come out of this is that we do want some councillor training so that we're all on board. We do want to see the new building when it's up, and maybe the training can happen there. But and also just in terms of capturing individual councillors and the collective council's knowledge about their communities and working with you on that. So those are the key 3 things I heard. So having said that, I'll put, we've got a mover in a second, I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Council, we're going to take a 10-minute adjournment for comfort. on to the General Manager's report on page 28.
Thanks, Councillor Paula. This is in two parts. I'll talk about the Indoor Recreation Centre Trust part first, and I've got Sally here who can help me with the give a bit more of an explanation around the playground bit of my report. So just on the trust, you can see from the written material that council with the trust that's going to run the Indoor Recreation Centre and have a relationship not only with council but with the sporting codes that will use it from the community and also the school, that council has the ability to appoint two trustees. Myself and also former councillor Margaret Forsyth were appointed as trustees to the trust in the last term of council. Unfortunately, because of commitments to her coaching role with the Magic Netball, Margaret Forsyth has had to resign as a trustee, and that leaves us in the position where we can appoint another person to that. I'm suggesting in my report that Councillor Southgate's that person is the chair of this committee, obviously has oversight of, as part of the portfolio of this committee, is looking at recreation, sport and community matters. So that's my recommendation. I'll probably just give a little bit of an update as well. I'll put a photo in here as well, just an update on the recreation centre itself. There's a photo at the past, there's a page number actually, on page 48. So that photo is a few days old. So the recreation centre, which is being built at the senior high school at Rotatuna, so there's good progress being made, and looking at a July completion of the facility. The trust is up and running. You can see the trustees that are in the trust deed. We've been having regular meetings over the past 4 or 5 months. We now have an employee for the trust, Liz Khan, who's taken over as she'll be the centre manager essentially. She's been working for about 3 weeks now, so she's got a lot of work to do. Trustees have been working hard, just getting all the logistics of working through an operating agreement with the school, looking at fit out of the facility. So there's a whole lot of practical matters that we're working through, getting a bank account set up, all those sorts of things. So Liz has hit the ground running, is now working through a prioritised long list of matters that she needs to attend to get the trust that's going to run the facility and the facility in a space where it can start being used later in the year once it's completed, and we're coming out of the defects period from construction once it's handed over from Aero Construction to MOE and then to the trust to run the facility. If you get a chance to go up there, then go up and have a look. You can, from the outside, you'll see it's a big space, and I can probably arrange before the opening for councillors to go and have a look if that's what people want. Happy to do that. Obviously it'll be a work site and everyone will have to get in vis jackets, high vis jackets and that sort of stuff, but you can actually see it from the staff room as well, from the high school staff room. There's a glass window which looks down on it as well. So quite impressive, and it's if you go out there you can see the size of the facility that's adjacent to the school. So good progress being made. The one thing around working with codes, there's been quite a bit of work done around the markings on the courts and also the equipment to fit out things like scoreboards and goal hoops and a whole bunch of other things. And the devil's in the detail, and then the trust is keen to make sure that we get that right, and a number of the codes have been involved in those discussions with, especially with Michelle Hollins, who's the chair of the trust, just working through that detail with our construction people and the suppliers to make sure that we get it right. So probably in a few weeks' time, once the trust is, we've got a couple of meetings coming up, is work through more detail around Liz's work plan, just on when the facility will be open, A, for the school to use a couple of courts for their curriculum, and B, for obviously the the whole facility after hours for the community to use, so we'll get a bit more clarity around that in a few weeks' time, just making sure that it is in a fit state. We want to make sure when it opens that it can be used, but then weighing that up with, we don't want a facility that's sitting there apparently empty for a while, so it's just getting that balance right. Liz comes with some really good credentials. She's worked for Belgravia in Australia and run some very big facilities from start up right through, and also she's run other large facilities that have been upgraded too. So she's and then came back to New Zealand, ran her own business for a while, and is now a resident in the Rotorua area. So I think we've got a good person from a very good group of candidates to run the facility going forward. So essentially we need that other trustee can represent councils and wider interests on that trust board. Have to say we've got a good bunch of trustees. Everyone's working really well together. There's quite a few meetings, quite a commitment, and a lot of hard work being done. So I think we're in a good space moving forward, and obviously just making sure we've got that relationship with the school very clear, based around the heads of agreement that we signed up to. So happy to take any questions on that part of the report.
Sure, thank you. And
Councillor Paula.
Can we put on the minutes a vote of thanks to Margaret for her work on that board up until now, because she's done some good work out there, so thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks. I'm glad, Madam Chair, that you've agreed to take on all that commitment for those meetings. Through you to the GM, when we appointed Margaret Forsyth, it wasn't because of her position, it was because of her interest and knowledge in the area, and I'm not saying that Paula doesn't have that, but I'm a bit worried about appointing it to a position. Having the position appointed to the trustees thing, I would rather that we nominated Paula Southgate for it rather than the chair of the committee, because in future that may not be the right way of doing it. We pick a person for that sort of job, in my opinion. So I'd be interested in your comments why you went with the position. The other question I've got is concerning the booking arrangements there. I realise what you said, that things are not certain about exactly when it's going to start and so forth, but my experience with bookings, you need to book a long way ahead to get everything sorted out to allow sports to promote their activities and to allow any jockeying and clashes to be sorted out. And the longer that's left, the harder it is. I don't see why bookings for the latter part of the year can't already be being taken, at least penciled in. Out there, I know that it's causing sporting codes a problem that can't happen yet. I've had that feedback both from my own sport and from another sport already. And I see an email from the new manager saying I'm not taking any bookings at all, even from organisations that want to run trial events there, which would probably help everyone. So I'm asking you to comment on that consideration, that we need to get, the reason we're putting this in is because it's way overdue, something like this in Hamilton, i.e. there's a desperate need amongst those indoor sporting codes. Let them, but they're being stopped from making any plans to use that at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's a temporary situation. Like I said, we've got a trust meeting tomorrow and then one next week to work through all that detail. As I said, I think in a couple of weeks' time we'll have a lot more clarity around what we can tell the codes. We're well aware of that, so that we've been getting that feedback, and we've had it through Sport Waikato too, so they've passed that on. And I think it's a fair point. Just so that I think even if we can say when we'll be taking bookings and when the facility will be available, and get real clarity on that, and make sure that we stick to that, and we can stick to that. I think that's just what we're trying to do over the next couple of weeks, so that we don't want to promise something, over-promise and then under-deliver, because I think when we get this facility going, we want to make sure that it actually works well in that especially that first 12 months. But absolutely hear what you're saying. We're well aware of those issues, and I think it's a good point, so I appreciate that. So I will be making that point at the trust board meeting tomorrow night, and also the one next week. We're working through a whole bunch of detail, and that's part of it. So, and some of it's also around, yes, we can take pencil bookings, but also just sorting out the booking system we're going to use, things like that, get the right software, making sure that it's compatible with it. So there's a whole lot of technical issues too, but that's something obviously we can sort out in the next wee while once we work through that. Just make sure that we want to get it right the first time. So I think it's a good point, so I appreciate that.
And the appointment of the person or the position to the trustees?
Yeah, maybe I didn't preface it that well, and it was really a two-way thing. I wanted to make a suggestion about that, and also I thought that Councillor Southgate had, obviously been involved in governance, has had some involvement in indoor recreation previously, and we discussed this, and if we were both relaxed if there was other suggestions.
No, that wasn't my point at all. Sorry, Lance. It was that we should appoint the right person for the job, not the position for the job.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a good point. So the board, what we looked at was what was the skills that we needed on the board, and then obviously we had to look at it from the organisation that they're representing, their view as well. And I think this council's view back in October and November last year was that, or might have been earlier than that, was that you were comfortable for the GM, me, with the skills I've got, and then also the knowledge and experience that Margaret had as an elected member, but also from her sporting knowledge and her governance knowledge as well. So it was
Sorry, I'm not making myself clear. The sentence in the report says that we should appoint the chair of the Community Services Committee. I'm asking why we're not appointing a person as opposed to the position.
Yeah, just a clarification there.
Well, I'm looking at the report
Councillor
itself.
McPherson. Yeah, no, just in the recommendation it just says appoint me, and as I say, we had a conversation. I was happy to take up that position, but I'm also happy if someone else has got a burning interest and desire.
Sorry, Councillor Southgate. Councillor McPherson's not questioning your role. He believes you should be appointed based on...
Yeah, and that's what the recommendation says.
Absolutely. What he's questioning is whether or not it's by right is the chair of this committee, or by the fact that you are passionate and skilled in that area that you get appointed, and he's arguing the latter rather than the former. So I think it's noted, and I think going forward, if this renews as well, the intention's clear as well, the best person for the role gets appointed, not necessarily because they happen to be the chair of the committee.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's what the recommendation says here. So
Yeah, I know the recommendation says that, but the rationale in the report is what I'm questioning.
Cool.
Yeah, that's it. All done.
I am open to, as I say, I'm not bound to this, but yes.
If you were appointed as a trustee, can you guarantee that when I go into this facility, unlike places like the University Arts, the centre up at the university, I'll be in no doubt that this is a clear, excellent partnership between the City of Hamilton and the Rotorua High School?
The answer to that question is yes, that whoever is the appointed representative is there to represent the interests of this organisation appropriately under direction of council. So, yes.
Thank you. You'll get my vote.
The other thing is that the heads of agreement actually specifically says that Hamilton City Council's, I can't remember the exact wording, involvement in this has to be visually acknowledged in a prominent position within the centre. So well aware of the matter you're talking about, and we've made that implicit in the agreement with MOE.
And I say that so that the people, our ratepayers, along with our taxpayers, are clearly, see what their council on their behalf is doing. And thank you.
Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. Just a question. The recommendation is that you get appointed. Doesn't mention that Margaret Forsyth has resigned. Does that need to be mentioned in the recommendation? I notice it is in the report.
No.
Okay.
I don't think technically it needs to, no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so we'll go to, oh no, we'll leave that. Do you want to take the vote for that now and do the different votes at different times? We may.
Maybe we go to the second bit if you're comfortable with that.
Yep, do that.
So the new playground.
Sorry, are we going to speak to this at all?
Okay, that's fine. So can you just hold off till we get to the recommendations as a suite? That would be brilliant. Thank you.
the member is no longer an elected member?
No, but this council has the power to you could remove me tomorrow if you want, or Paula tomorrow. So the council has the power. So if there's a change of term of council, then that's up to the new council to make a decision on that. And that'll be, we'd go through that when we go through all the appointments to various trusts and boards and things like that, like we do at the start of a new triennium. So that ability's there. Yep.
Yes, but we haven't done the rotor yet.
This term? Yeah. So it was all very proactive.
And she would have continued if she had wanted to continue.
Your appointment doesn't have to be an elected member or a staff member. You could appoint 2 outside people if you wanted to.
Just to be clear, but the Hamilton City Council has the right to choose who it appoints to be their representative. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Whether or not as an elected member or a chairman or a...
It's just that the report itself is confusing on that aspect as to who's the member, because we didn't appoint, we appointed Margaret knowing she wasn't an elected member. This report's saying it should be an elected member, the report is saying, and it's also saying it should be the chair, and neither are actually the actuality.
Yeah, point taken.
We appoint whoever we like if we think they're good for the job.
The whole trust deed is in there, and if you go through the magnifying glass, you'd probably glean that, but accepting that, not everyone's going to do that, so fair enough.
And as I say, that this wasn't a predetermined decision. I was quite open to the fact that someone else out there might have a driving passion for and equal experience to do the role. So we'll move on to the Rototuna Playground, and then we'll take the suite of, we'll look at the recommendations when we get there.
So look, Sally might be able to add to this, but in the report there, we're rolling out our Playgrounds of the Future policy, and we have a sum of $906,000 capital expenditure for a large playground in the annual plan. We've had quite a bit of feedback through annual plan processes and LTP processes over the past wee while from people in specific areas, and one of them was around the Te Huia Reserve area and also around near Haripuki Park. So long story short, our view is that rather than building one destination playground on one of those sites, we're saying that we can, with a slight departure from our playgrounds policy, we can actually get a better bang for those bucks and actually do 2. The Te Huia Reserve has some restrictions on its size, so we're saying split the funding. The Haripuki Park allows us to stage it, so we could do a first stage of a playground, and then if resources become available, then we can actually add in some other components at a later stage. So what we're saying is we can actually get a better bang for bucks, and I'm not sure if Sally wants to add anything else.
Thank you, Lance, for that summary. The only thing I'd just like to add is that we're also taking on board the learnings that we have from the development of the destination playgrounds. So that has looked at recognising the site constraints, but also exploring the opportunities that we have with the new school adjacent to Haripuki Park. I'd also like to recognise that Katie King, who was very vocal within the Te Huia area, was really the driving force behind the Playgrounds of the Future plan that was developed by Council. And so we've kept in touch with Katie to advise her of our thoughts, and you would have seen an article recently that she does support this concept, and I think it will benefit those communities very well. So that's why we're putting forward a pragmatic approach to you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Mayor King, and I understand you want to foreshadow some.
There's been a mix-up there. Dave's supposed to be directly behind me. Anyway.
Oh, sorry, I haven't got him here.
I'm just questioning the financial impact of C and why wouldn't we put this off and bring it up together with the 10-year plan when we consider the context of us knowing that our financial position isn't robust, and this is another $1 million, and I'm suggesting that we move it forward to the 10-year plan discussion for this part of, so C only.
So my understanding, this is in the annual plan draft budget, which you've already approved?
Yeah, it surely is, there's no question about
So
that.
you'll be talking about deferring a project that's in the draft annual plan, and that's council's prerogative. If you want to bump that to the LTP, I think you will get some feedback from that community up there if that's the way you head, so I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, totally agree, but there's also new information that's come to light in the last few months about our financial position, and this is another $1 million that I'm suggesting would be better put in together with everything else, so everything gets discussed together as to our spend in the 10-year plan. So I'll be moving to take C out of the recommendation, or to, if the chair's happy, to do it as separate votes.
I will take it as separate votes because I suspect that in the debate there'll be some conversation about it. So yeah, but I'm aware that you've got something that you would like to table or remove. So yeah, that's good.
So if you can take it as separate votes, there's no motion required.
I definitely will. Sorry, next up is Councillor Casson.
A couple of questions for Lance, actually. So how much did we spend on the Dominion Road destination playground?
I'll get Sally to answer.
From top of memory, it was around 1.2, but that did include external funding that was gained for that project. So that included the toilet facility, landscaping, as well as the playground. And there was over around, I think, 250 to 300,000 external funding with that project.
Okay. Yeah, and you mentioned Katie King before, who's in the North Eastern Community Hub. You know, I applaud her for championing this cause. But there's big interest in the North East for these parks, with these big grassy bits there that just doing nothing. If we split this funding, the 906,000 between the two parks, what will we actually get for that if you halve that or whatever? Because if you spent 1.2 million on one park alone, what are we going to get in the northeast if you split it?
So in terms of my understanding and discussions with the team, it will be a neighbourhood type playground within the Tohuya Reserve site, because it is a smaller site, and then there will be a larger playground that will allow for additional fun add-ons at the Haripuki site. So we are still trying to apply for external funding for this playground as well, but what we would do is deliver definitely a full playground at Tohuya, and that we would look at the design options for the Haripuki site going forward to be added on to if needed, if we're unsuccessful in securing additional funding. We are also talking to the school about what they can contribute to Haripuki Park site as well.
Okay, and just finally, will either of these playgrounds, which I support both, will either of them have toilet facilities? Because big question from a lot of residents is we go to these parks and the playgrounds here and there's absolutely no toilets.
So yes, it will. So part of the funding that is identified in year 3 and the annual plan for next year is to include toilets as well as the CCTV, which we have installed at Dominion Park. The toilets will be sited at Haripuki because it is will be a larger facility.
Fantastic. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Henry.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Look, I just want to, Sally, to you as well, just asking, or maybe to Lance, how you're talking about in partnership with the Ministry of Education to develop Haripuki Park. I mean, how happy are they about that, or have you asked them yet, or is it just a thought at the moment to get in contact with them?
No, we've been having a lot of meetings with them, with A, the design of their school, and B, the design of the park next door. I met with a member of their Board of Trustees on Friday and a staff member from MOE personally and discussed that. They're fully supportive. They're fully supportive of the partnership model, and there was also a wider discussion about what's happening in the whole northeast area with MOE, e.g. what's happening at Rotorua High School and other schools, especially this new primary school that's going into. So we'd be locating the playground close to the school so that we can hopefully leverage some partnership resources out of the MOE and potentially out of the School Board of Trustees or sympathetic parents whose kids might go to that school. There's always parents who work for large companies or have their own medium-sized companies and things like that, and quite often we'll get, you know, smaller amounts of money, you know, for a particular component in a playground or something like that. So definitely that partnership model, and we're working pretty closely with the school around this and also the sports field matter as well.
Okay. The other question I just have, I mean, talking about toilets and things like that, have we put any thoughts into making it as some of the parts as a community build? Like, you know, a toilet block could be built out of adobe bricks or straw bales or there's a whole lot, a raft of different things that actually can be done as a community build. Because I see in that area you probably have more likely that people would help than in some other areas of Hamilton. So I just want to float that if that's a possibility to look at as well, because I think people want to, then they also take more ownership of it as well. So and we'll look after it better. That's just my thought. So if you can look into that, that would be really awesome. Thank you.
I might comment, Sally might want to comment further, but just for example, with starting to do the concept plan for the Rotorua Park between North City Road and the new high schools, Sally's team's been working with the students at the high schools and getting them involved in thoughts around concept designs and that sort of thing. And we're going to have bike tracks through our park, and they're putting a pump track and also some bike tracks around the school periphery as well. So how do we integrate those two together without kids getting squashed crossing the road and that sort of stuff? So I think there's some quite innovative thinking happening with our team working with not just the staff at the school, but probably more with the some of the older students there.
Yeah, it's great exercise too to build something, so that could be looked into as well.
Yeah, and I think what you're alluding to is a good example at Embassy Park in the CBD, where we've had the community group and, you know, we've come up with a different looking toilet block, and we all know Huntavasa and Kawaka and up north. So, you know, I think there's an opportunity there to look at, you know, things that are a bit different and also, you know, reflect the amenity and particular values of those local areas where we're locating those.
Cool. Thank you.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes, thanks. Well, I'm pleased that we're moving away from the policy just of destination parks. So I always thought that was a mistake to focus on that alone. I'm curious as to how that's come up, because when you look at the footprint of the Minogue Park destination park and even the Dominion Road one, I'm pretty sure they're smaller than the Tahuia Reserve area, you know, where the actual playground and the complex is. So I'm not sure, and I'd like your comment on buying the argument that Tahuia is too small for one of those sorts of the most recent destination parks we've had. They mightn't fit the lake one in, but they'd fit the other two. That one park, I'm pretty sure. So I don't know how this. I'm curious to find out how this split of the two came up, because maybe we can try and replicate it elsewhere.
I think a lot of it's the partnership opportunity that was just talked about too, is working with the school around the design of the primary school and where we located it at Haripuki Park. Sally might want to comment on the actual particular design.
I'd like to just home on that. So in 16, where it says will only accommodate a small playground because of the size of the reserve, that's not necessarily the case. You know, I just don't see. You're now saying to me it's not because of the size of the available, you know, footprint area. It's because the ministry might put in some cash for something down the road a kilometre or so.
So if I can just add to that in relation to item 16 within the report, Tahuia Reserve is on a few levels, and also it's longer and more narrower than our other sites. So that's one of the constraints that we've talked about on that site of if we were to develop a larger destination playground, it may actually end up extending and taking up a lot of the open space, which that community would also like to use maybe for kicking a ball around and flying a kite. So those are the types of considerations that we're talking about.
So it would actually fit in? Let's say a Minogue Park size destination playground.
The size, I would say that the width of Minogue Park wouldn't fit into that site. It would have to be a lot longer and narrower, and I don't think it would also provide, there's different opportunities that you can have there, but I think it is a smaller site than our current parks. And also the other consideration, which is noted in that item, is the adjoining residential properties are very close to the boundary, which is quite different to Minogue Park.
I find it curious then that we proposed to Huia Reserve for a destination playground without checking that sort of stuff first. Because you've now given an expectation to people living in the Te Huia Park area they're going to get something like Dominion Road Park, probably, because that's what's been on the radar in the last couple of years.
So 100% point noted, but I think also recognising that we are taking on the learnings from our previous developments, and that is anything that you have with a policy or plan that you implement, you take those learnings on, and that's what we're doing in this occasion as well. But definitely note your point.
I'm all for, I realise I'm getting a little bit into debate here, but I'm trying to tease out what the real reasons are, Madam Chair, because I'm all for taking opportunities and varying policy, because a lot of times policies don't fit reality, and maybe the reality here is something different. But I just wish we'd adopt that process everywhere, not just when we've got the ministry maybe putting up a bit of cash for playgrounds. So that's one point, but just in relation to the Sylvester Road or Haripuki Park area, are we hearing, reading between the lines correctly, that the ministry at that school doesn't propose to put in their own playground like they do at most schools? They propose to use the public one and maybe put a bit of cash towards that, where we're trying to achieve that. Is that the outcome that is looking like happening there?
Partly, but it's also they also want the school to be open to the public on the weekends, whereas a lot of schools don't want public there. So the discussion is around if they've got a couple of fields there and some play equipment and other things that the community could use, then how do they open the school up, a bit like the discussion that's happening with the Rototuna Board of Trustees too, which they're doing. So I think it's about a true partnership where they open up the school to the community, but also then there's they can use the council park next door if necessary.
You see, that's an admirable policy, but I read couple of days ago about the moves in central Auckland. They're not going to have parks at all because there's a council park next door, and they can negotiate to use that, put in a little bit of cash or something like that. So I'm a bit worried that our reasons are fine, and I agree with just what you suggested as philosophy, but are they looking at a way to do it cheaper, save Ministry of Education dollars in order to and use the public facility? Maybe it doesn't sound that transparent from their side.
It's not my understanding. They have got sufficient fields on their footprint for their number of children. That's what they say. But I think it's about then how do they open that up to the public, so that if we've got 3 or 4 fields at Haripuki Park, how we as the council and the community get access to the 2 fields they have. And then if they have a tournament or something like that, then them using the facilities next door or for some other school activities. I think a good example has been the Deanwell School playground, and I think that's been a good example where we do work in partnership. And it's probably not with the MOE, it's probably more with the Board of Trustees, and that will differ. Some will have a close it up and keep the place secure mentality, others will be open up. We're finding that a lot more Board of Trustees are now being a lot more lateral and open in their thinking. So I think that's what we want to foster. And I'd like to foster that it is a true partnership, not, you know, one gets more benefit out of it than the other.
So as a result of that, can we check what they're putting into the skin they're putting into the game, that the value of that is what, you know, an average school would be spending on playgrounds and sports fields? So that, you know, they're not getting it on the cheap for the ministry, is what I'm worried about.
I don't have that detail here, but I can...
Yeah, I don't mean now. Can staff please ensure that happens?
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor?
Thanks, Paula. Can I just clarify, maybe I'm having a bit of a foggy day, I don't know, but can I just clarify the cost implications? So there's no extra cost implications by having 2 playgrounds for us?
We've got the consequential OPEX in there as well. Look, there'll probably be some minor extra cost in our playgrounds guys having to drive, you know, a bit further down the road and check another playground. So that would be quite minimal. So I think there won't be significant additional cost.
Okay, on the face of it, it seems like a good idea. The other question I've got is just in regard to Mayor Andrews' suggestion about Tahuia. Can I just ask a process question there? Because that's in the annual plan, isn't it, the Tahuia playground?
That's correct.
And presumably, and the submission's on Thursday, and presumably that people would have been open to make submissions on that plan. Can we actually sort of vote it down here before submissions are even heard on it? I don't know. Just a question.
I'm just thinking of the process. I would say it would be a safer process that there was a recommendation to the annual plan deliberations around that.
Okay. Ta.
Okay, did everyone understand that, where that's at? Yep. Okay, Councillor Gallagher.
On from that, I do see the recommendation says in principle. So if I've got that, year 3 of the 10-year plan is this annual plan that we're actually discussing. So all we're being asked today is a proven principle. We'll be hearing submission process, and then obviously whether any project even survives in the context of the annual plan. This is not, as I would understand it to be helpful, this is not tying us at all financially, because there's an issue of an in principle acknowledgement, but the annual plan itself will determine the actual whether the money is still there. Have I got that right? I think I've got that right.
Yeah, so if there's a whole bunch of submissions, as Councillor Jeff suggested, that says no, we don't want playgrounds, or whatever, then it gets voted down in deliberations, then there wouldn't be any money to spend on playgrounds. So,
as part of the long-term plan discussion, would the Chair and the GM be empathetic to the need for us as a committee to have a very thorough discussion strategically around where we see over the next 10 years the partnership between ourselves and Ministry of Education properties going? Because obviously on this one, if in fact we invest in a, say, playground next to a school property, then it's an absolute bottom line, triple bottom line, given that that school will be open appropriately to public after hours, all of that, recreation buildings, you know, and there's some ways you do that, as against a scenario where you put a playground up and you're next to the park and it's slap bang next to a school fence. And it seems to me, Madam Chair, and I'm just wanting to perhaps tease out the GM from his Auckland and other experiences, Sally obviously, it just seems to me that it's high time, as part of our LTP, we had a kind of a broader discussion and did a bit of a grid list and a run list of all of our schools in the city. Those are fenced, those are not, because this is trying to maximise value you know, for our recreation budget. So it's not just neighbourhood parks who walk to a playground, it's actually what is going on when a number of schools in this city now have their great green spaces which can be used on the weekends to kick a ball around for our kids fenced off. And I think as a council, so what I'm wanting is I think it'll be really good, because from a money point of view, it seems to me that if we open some of those fences on the weekend, we might be saving ourselves some of our budget. If you can see where I'm coming from, General Manager.
Yeah, so, and there's a number of things wound into that: playground, sports fields and those sorts of things. So as we discussed at the briefing last week about the program for discussions around the LTP and proposals in there, and obviously Council's going to have to prioritise a whole bunch of different things, we can bring that information back. So when we talk about the playgrounds program and proposals and the sports fields, then you'll have that context to weigh that up about how far we head down that track and where are the opportunities.
Well, you see, it seems to me that we're dealing with parks, playgrounds that we own. There's a lot of parks and playgrounds that we own as taxpayers, but curiously we can't after hours get access to them as taxpayers, and I want that sort of joined up conversation. We've got, for example, Christchurch, other places, projects where the schools might fence off their building, a la the wonderful Myra Intermediate, but they keep their green playgrounds open, and there may be some deal where we work with a caretaker to open a fence on the weekend, close it at night, all of that kind of thing. So without getting to the big debate today, in another committee we talked about the Richmond Park school premises. It just seems to me, through our LTP colleagues, we need this big conversation, because this is two pockets. Taxpayers provide a lot of green space in this town via schools. We as ratepayers provide a lot of green space, playgrounds as parks, and it's joining the two up. And I think it'll be a really good conversation to have, strategically moving forward.
Yep, I think there's some information that needs to come forward to support that. So, have you finished, Councillor Gallagher? Finished?
Of course, very concise in my contributions, as you well know, as Councillor McPherson will attest to.
Okay, then in that case, I'll move on to Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Completely supportive of the Deputy Mayor's comments through his questions around. I think it's a tragedy that schools are fenced off in this day and age, but anyway. So, Sally, I just need clarification, because Te Huia is signalled for a destination playground, so that's the big, all the bells and whistles. So are you saying we're not going to do a destination playground there? We're going, and when I say neighbourhood playgrounds, we actually have criteria exactly what a neighbourhood playground is. So are we getting two neighbourhood playgrounds? This is not the old karate swing slide and whatever else goes on. This, I mean, it's a decent size. So we're getting two of those, not one destination.
So just in response to that, we haven't yet gone through the design process for either of these playgrounds.
Yeah.
What we are indicating within this report, if there is in principle support, that we would go out to the community and do our normal consultation on what they would like to see, and that then feeds into the design process that they would then be able to comment on. I think what we're trying to do with the funding is develop two playgrounds on these sites, and just in terms of size, I referred to the neighbourhood playground type of playground, but yes, that is not the swing set and the seesaw and the slide that you've experienced previously.
But it's also not a destination playground.
It would not be as significant in size as a destination playground, but it would be designed for that sense of location, so it would have its own quirkiness as our other destination playgrounds do, and that is our style of design going through now.
And the reason you're asking us to change this decision is because of community feedback that you've had?
Well, we identified for the funding within the annual plan is that it is for a destination playground, so the community would see that as one playground development.
Yeah.
So that's why we're asking for the support in principle, but we haven't done the consultation of design type yet with the community.
So if they come back and say no, we want the one big bells and whistles destination, because the other two destination playgrounds we've got programmed in are Ash in the north, a Moonlight Drive, but that's not till 2028, and then Ashurst is 2026. So they have to wait a really long time to get a big, destination playgrounds are the whole day out and spend that time with the family.
So if you think of the Rototuna space within this area, there has been significant growth within this part of the city. Haripuki Park does provide a larger landscape, and therefore I would see that being a larger playground that could provide that new growing community as well. So, from our perspective of what we're putting forward is we think it's a good proposal for both of those, for the communities, but it is up for your discussion, obviously.
Okay, so if we agree in principle and then you go and talk to the community, and if any red flags pop up, you'll come back to us?
Yes, we would, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mayor King?
What's cost for the other two destination programs we've recently opened? The toilets and the camera systems?
In terms of Minogue as well as Hamilton Lake Domain, there were toilets already present on site. I don't know the final figures off the top of my head for the Dominion Park toilet component of that budget I quoted earlier. What we have identified and requested through the annual plan was bringing forward of funding that was in the 10-year plan for toilets at Tahuya, and I think that was around a $280,000 budget for toilets. We also have requested $100,000 capex for the CCTV, and that is included with the $906,000 budget of this report. So I just can't quote you off the top of my head for what Dominion toilet cost.
So you're saying that in the $920,000 budget, you've allowed for $380,000 for toilets and CTV twice or once?
Just once, so that's included within that budget.
So for $380,000, we get 2 lots of CTV and we get 2 lots of toilets?
No, just one.
So what about the other playground?
So that's what was asked before, was whereabouts would the toilet be located. The split would be that the toilet would be located at Haripuki Park because it would be the larger of the two parks. So it would be in location. The CCTV, we would obviously looking at options there, but as I say, we haven't gone through and designed this yet, so I don't have that level of detail, I'm sorry.
So there's nearly $400,000 out of $900,000 for toilet and security at one of the parks?
Yes.
So that leaves $500,000 and $540,000 for the playground?
Yes.
So surely aren't we being irresponsible putting in a playground without toilets and CTV? Because, I mean, that's what we did at Dominion Park with the security, and we end up having to go back and put it in. Surely that's part of the package, part of the components, and by splitting it into two, you're just going to come back to us next year and ask for another $380,000 for toilets for the other one.
Sally won't be coming back to us.
Well, maybe Lance is the person to ask. I mean, we know full well that a playground requires security and toilets. That's what we've learnt so far, and yet we're putting up a proposal without a camera and toilets on one of the playgrounds, which is surely just setting us up to having to approve another $380,000 at the 10-year plan.
Potentially, but I'd say that we probably won't be putting CCTV cameras at all our playgrounds. We may not need to, so depending on what sort of activity there is and that sort of thing. So,
well, that takes $100,000 out. It's still $280,000.
Yes, you're partially right. I think Haripuki Park also got to realise it's going to be a sports park, and if you've got sports fields there in the future, then there will be changing rooms and toilet facilities and things like that needed. Just bearing in mind, I know we've had feedback in the development of the policy that where we can, we should be having toilets and shade and drinking fountains and things like that. Not all of our playgrounds facilities have that at the moment, and yes, we incrementally come back and actually have sometimes asked for other additions to those parks. Obviously, with these, we'd also be looking at external funding as well.
So aren't you better off doing one well instead of one where you're setting us up for another $400,000 spend in a year's time? Fully knowing, everybody around this room now knows that we're going to have to put toilets in there in the near future, because you've told us that. So why wouldn't we just do one playground well and make it a full destination playground with toilets, with CTV, with shade cloths, instead of doing them both half pie where we're going to have to come back and pour more money into them at next annual plan?
I think because we've got an opportunity at the moment to work with the school around that, and so I think, and we've got an opportunity for external funding, and yes, we've got the LTP coming up to look at our whole program, and I think that's where your heading is, and Councillor O'Leary alluded to the list that we've had from the previous LTP is actually reviewing that. Do we want to speed that up? Do we want to slow it down, all in light of our financial situation and that sort of thing? So I think we've got an opportunity here to do something, and I did say that the Haripuki one would be staged. There would be an opportunity to expand it if that was desired and it proved to be the case that's needed.
So you're still recommending that we go with 2 playgrounds, half finished, and asking for more money
I
at the
wouldn't
next
say they'll be
annual plan round?
half finished, they'll just be a bit smaller than destination playgrounds.
But
You
you're still going to need...
You have 2 communities that actually have some value from it sooner than what they would otherwise working through the program.
If I can...
But you're still coming back to us to ask, we're still going to have to put up more money in the short term because it's not complete. There's no shade cloths, there's no toilets in the second playground, there's no CTV in the second playground, or in either playground.
Yeah. So if I can just respond, within the playgrounds of the future plan, there is it is identified that staff will find approximately $250,000 worth of external funding, which isn't included within this budget, and also staff will use the budget as a total budget to develop both of these playgrounds. I think, unfortunately, you're going into a level of detail that we don't have design options for at the moment. So I'm not saying that we can't stretch our money more in terms of other councillors' comments about getting communities involved, that external funding, the support from the MOE. So I think, yes, we have a criteria of what we need to develop at playgrounds. We need to be able to get into that level of design to define what's on both of those parks and the best that we can do within the budget we've got. The additional external funding will definitely help support bridging that gap, and we also can develop our playgrounds that we can add to as stages when funding becomes available as well. So I think there are multiple options there.
So how much external funding did you get for Dominion Park?
I think it was around 300,000.
And you're confident you can raise that?
Yes, I am, and we have been very successful in fundraising for our playgrounds. The community do really support these as fundable items. So yes, I do believe that we will be successful in gaining that funding.
Which will mean you're in a position to put your toilets in on day one and not come back to us and ask for more money?
That's what we would aim for, yes, definitely.
Either of these parks, which is a sports park out of these 2 parks?
Haripuki Park.
So how many sports fields will there be on that park?
We're just currently going through the design process for that at the moment. Off the top of my head, I think it could be up to 4 fields.
What was it originally when we purchased the land? What was it set up for?
It would be that number, yes.
So we're setting this playground up in a way that doesn't interfere with the sports
Most definitely,
areas.
yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. Just continuing on Mayor Andrews' questioning there, do we have, are we obliged to put toilets in every playground or not?
Well, I don't think we're obliged to, but we have got a policy that recommends that we do that, because during the development of that policy we went out and got feedback, and parents, especially younger children, said that they found it quite useful to actually have somewhere where the kids can go to the bathroom,
Right.
Especially if they've travelled some distance. If they're locals, they're just walking there sometimes, but we all know if we've had young kids that fluid goes in and fluid needs to come out. So,
okay. Yeah, I think I've probably got enough information on that. Thanks. Because I was just wondering how many of our playgrounds, Sally, you might be able to answer that we have got toilets and how many haven't?
We have over 60 toilets across the city, so I can't break that down to every park, I'm sorry. But our destination playgrounds that we have developed, we have put toilets in. Our neighbourhood playgrounds, which are our smaller modular playgrounds, or as Councillor O'Leary referred to before as our 30 to 40-year-old swing, seesaw and slide sets, don't always have a toilet with them. So our smaller playgrounds don't, but if they're on a sports park, there would be a toilet and a changing room.
Right, yeah. Okay.
So the plan itself refers to destination playgrounds having a toilet and subsidiary facilities, so the landscaping, that sort of thing, to make it more of a half an hour visit or an hour visit, and more of a day visit, half a day visit.
A day in a playground?
Yeah,
wow.
You can do, yes.
Cool. Okay, that's all for me, thanks. Things I didn't know.
Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if you've got a mover for motion 2, but I'm happy to do that. But I just wanted to check with Lance whether, if I added, just listening to the conversations around the table, whether it would work if staff could come back with design and funding proposals for both playgrounds to give the committee some peace of mind on what we're getting.
yeah, and I think that ties in what Councillor McPherson, the information he suggested we come back with before, so we're more than happy to do that. So as Sally said, we haven't gone through the detailed design of these yet, and so that you've got some reassurance that we aren't going to end up in a situation that Mayor King's concerned
and
about.
That concerns me as well. So can I chuck in some wording for that? Can you hit an end date, end of the year, or a month or something? What?
I'll just turn the blowtorch on Sally.
Sally, before she leaves.
No, not before I leave. So just in relation to that, we need to go out and do some public consultation. So I would say that September, October would be a good time frame.
Okay, I'll work on that wording.
Okay, so Angela's foreshadowed she's going to move this with a little bit of wording. I suspect that Andrew has his own opportunity in the debate too. So we'll just finish the questions and then we'll go to the recommendation.
Sorry, it was a question that came up arising out of others in relation to the gold-plated toilets that we're going to be putting in. 280,000 could build a small house with carpets and all other furnishings probably, but in fact the one at Dominion Park's so good that I wouldn't mind sort of having a kip in there with my grandchildren. Yeah, so that's very, very classy, very classy. But they're in the public, say down Victoria Street, they don't get those sort of flash toilets. They get an Exeloo. Yeah, but the Exeloos have some quite good facilities in them. If that's the module you pick, if that's the right word, why wouldn't we be looking at something like that, which I understood last was about 90 grand or something fully set up for the flash ones? I mean, do we have to have Dominion Road, gold-plated ones?
So I disagree on the gold-platedness because I haven't seen any gold in there. But
well, it's sure gold in the pockets of the people who build them then.
The toilets, Exeloos also do not cost that amount either. So I think that the budget would be looked at to ensure that we get the best bang for our toilet size for the location, and that yes, those would all be options for us to look at for the toilet. So point noted.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're going to go on to the debate. Angela has said that she would like to move C with a little bit of additional wording. I am aware that Mayor Andrews also got an interest in that. I'm going to take them separately so that we can distinguish between the Rototuna issue and the playgrounds. So what we'll do we have a mover for A and B, just to Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Henry. And Angela, you have a seconder for C and whatever additional words that you have? All right, well, let's have those up and we can. Okay, so we can. The A is A and B. A is just received the report. B, the recommendation to the appointment of the board. Anybody want to talk on that issue?
Obviously, we're right.
Yeah. I already said that the Margaret's contribution should be acknowledged in the minutes, and certainly we can send a letter to Margaret. Thank you.
We look forward to you matching her esteemed contribution to sport.
Is the Deputy Mayor speaking to this motion?
I'm just getting there. So we're going to. You want to speak to the motion?
No. Just thanking.
Okay.
Thanking Margaret and wishing you well.
Right. Thank you, Dave. Do you want to talk to the motion?
Yeah. Look, I support the motion as it stands, but I actually don't think we can do that. Oh, sorry, we're recommending to council. That's right, because it's council. Sorry, I am. Forget the qualification. I am supporting it. It's council's decision because council makes those appointments, not this body. It's the first time we've discussed an appointment actually at a committee meeting as opposed to a council, but nothing to say
digging yourself out of it, mate.
nothing to say we can't. But what I'm concerned about is that we always, when we're looking at those appointments, choose who we think's right for it. And that's why we reappointed Margaret Forsyth at the start of this council. She wasn't a councillor. We reappointed her because we thought she was the right person for the job and would represent the community's interests. That we were there on behalf of the community, not on behalf of the council in actuality, as opposed to the Ministry of Education appointees who were there on behalf of the school. And that was the sort of differential. So I just want to stress, if Paula's elected, that's what she's there on behalf of the whole community. And the problem was sort of highlighted a bit by the Deputy Mayor before with the Performing Arts Academy at the university, where there's a constant tension up there, not necessarily a very productive one sometimes, between community usage and university usage. Here, there is at every other school gym that's used by the public, there's a real tension between school demands and community demands, and that's what that trust is particularly going to have to manage. So I'm just I'm probably stating the obvious there, but we really need to make that the focus of our representatives and report back on any issues. So I guess, Lance, there will be a reporting back sort of mechanism at some stage as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. If there's nobody else who wants to speak, I'll just say, look, I take that on board. I see when you are a representative of these groups on behalf of council, your role is to be the mouthpiece of the council that puts you there. And so, I will be making my best endeavour to ensure that you can put your feedback through me and Lance appropriately, rather than operating in any kind of unilateral way. Having said that, if between now and council somebody's sitting there with a burning passion and they feel they also have the skills, well, I'm also open to that, believe me. But I'm happy to go there and do the work on behalf of council if that's council's will. So thank you for that. Okay, so we'll vote on those two. Oh, Becca, can we vote on those two? Can we vote on them separately or with the voting button, or just do it verbally?
Up to you.
Oh, sure.
Undercut, Dave, but 5.9.2 of the sorry, page 36. Two representative trustees appointed by council. What does that mean? But that means they're appointed by council, but they don't have to be councillors. Is that correct? Okay,
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm moving A and B, all in favour, opposed, carried. Thank you. And now we'll get on to the C, which is around the playgrounds, and we'll see Angela's thing. Oh, I can't read that.
You can take out the second. I thought we were doing an A and B as well for this one. That's why I named the playgrounds again. The second part, but you've added it all into one paragraph, so you can change. In principle, and that the design and funding proposals be reported to the. Oh. Are you going to do A and B, Becca? Oh. it's just easier, maybe. The first one's the same as what's in the report. And that the design, change proposals to plans, and B, and that the design and, and funding plan for playgrounds, or for the playgrounds at blah, 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 be reported, not reputed. Well done. And just put an A and B in there. Yep. Yep.
Okay, everyone. Is there a seconder? Councillor Casson. Yes. Yep.
Is the Haripuki Park within the 3 years of the long-term plan, or just the Tihua?
Oh, no, I don't know. Me Tahuia. Haripuki's not on the. Sorry, I'm doing Sally's job for her.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I mean,
No.
The destination playground funding is identified for Rototuna, so Tahunia Reserve, not Haripuki.
No Haripuki, so that means that bracket there is not right, is it?
Sorry?
As you say, that's the year 3 of the 2015-25 long-term plan. It doesn't matter because we're pushing the budget. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Park was in which plan?
So the funding was for a destination playground to be developed at Tahuia Reserve.
Yes.
What we are putting forward here is that we proportion the budget across Tahuia and Haripuki Park. So it is still using the same amount of budget.
And is Haripuki Park is it in any plans to have a playground? Is it in any of the, where is it in the 10-year plan?
So the development of Haripuki Park is not included within the 10-year plan for the sports park side, and it's, so no, it's not within the 10-year plan for budgeting.
So we bumped another playground into the annual plan that wasn't in the 10-year plan with not a complete budget to finish both playgrounds completely.
So within the annual plan, we have funding for a destination playground.
Yeah, I understand that, to complete it.
Yeah, so what we're identifying is that we're not bumping projects or playgrounds. We're going to utilise this funding to get 2 playgrounds within the price of 1. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to
finished. You've got full budget for both playgrounds finished.
So we will develop them within the budget, as well as hoping to get external funding, as I talked about before, to a level of use. So yes, finished.
And you're confident you're not going to come back here to ask for any more money?
Until we've done the design process, I cannot confirm that, but we would develop both of the playgrounds within the budget we have available to develop them. And if there is opportunity to add on in the future, that could be brought back to council. But I think the important part of point B is bringing these proposals back to council once we have a design for them.
Okay, so Mayor King, you are the mover. If you can get a seconder, because it's the amendment gets.
Second the motion.
Oh, I just did see Gary's hand.
Amendment, sorry.
Sorry, I did see Gary's hand go up slightly. Does it matter to you, Gary, whether it's you or Martin who seconds it?
No.
Okay, so we've got to move. It's just I saw you sort of at the same time. You spoke here.
You're right, I'll get my name up there. Get my name up there quick. Get my name up there quick.
All right.
For God's sake.
Madam Chair, just in the motion, if
well done.
If Councillor Casson is in agreement, just to change the word that an A approves to supports, because it's the whole thing's coming back. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we've got an amendment. Right, which is Mayor King's amendment, seconded by Gary. Do you want to speak to your amendment?
Shouldn't we have the speaker to the
No,
motion first?
no.
I've just been advised that the amendment goes first.
No, the speaker to the motion goes
Okay.
first.
I'll speak to the motion first. The voting goes the other way around. Okay, so Councillor O'Leary, speak forth.
Speak forth. Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, not much to say. I do share some concerns that Mayor Andrew, has raised. We do need to do these things right the first time and not then, go in a while later and retrofit things. And toilets are better at playgrounds, and we do want families to stay for as long as possible. But I'm confident that the motion will cover off some of the concerns that he's raised and other members have questioned. I will be very interested to see what the community comes back with, because we have consulted on these plans and had, and this council agreed to destination playgrounds. But I do have some sympathy as well with what Councillor McPherson said in the questionings around, perhaps there are some gaps with other parks and opportunities. So thank you for bringing us at least this opportunity to make a decision, and I look forward to seeing if we can get 2 playgrounds for the price of 1. But I hope we don't deviate too much, because the North East, as we all know, and I'm not an East Ward councillor, but has been crying out for a really long time for some of these facilities, and I think it would be nice one day to see one of those other 3 destination playgrounds up the North East, because we know from the lake and the Hamilton Gardens that indeed families spend the entire day there, and better to have people outside with fresh air and activity than inside with playstations and snacks. Thank you.
Thank you. James is the second. Did you want to make a comment? Or you?
Nothing other than it's fantastic that a West Ward councillor is supporting an East Ward initiative. It's very good. And but look, the community up North East has been screaming this for quite a while. And if you're part of the the community networks that's around about the North East, they have been going on about this for quite a while, as well as a swimming pool and library, etc. This is the first. It's a good small step for the community, and it's what's needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bunting.
Yes, it'll probably come as no shock that I'm supporting this, and echoing Councillor Casson's comments. Since I've been on council, the West is looking at getting 2 brand new subdivisions that have a rail trail. It's nice to be supporting something really nice for the East for a change. In my term. No, just stirring. Listen, I support it for 3 major reasons. This is Councillor O'Leary's motion. Look, it is smart use of money. It is smart use of money. I think gone are the days where if you want something, council will buy it for you. I applaud the creativity and the reaching out to the communities, and as we've seen with the Rototuna Sports Centre, great things can be achieved with partnerships, and that's the way of the future for this council, and our role is shifting as opposed to being just Santa Claus. We're instigators, and that's absolutely fantastic. It's smart thinking, and it's smart use of limited money, getting 2 for the price of 1 as far as I can see. Point 2 is it's in this area, and we need to be mindful of this as we look to growth as one of our major parts of our agenda, is that it's one thing to grow, but it's another thing to provide amenity. And to my mind, Rototuna, growth has outstripped amenity. You go up there and they're screaming for amenities. The only thing the kids seem to be able to play at the moment is how many grey tiles we can count. So it'll be great to see an acceleration of the amenity program. And thirdly, this community loves it. This community loves it. I've been to community meeting after community meeting up there. They love it. They understand our limited finances. They understand that council can't buy them everything. They understand priorities. But I, at risk of making a very, very bad joke, once we've got their buy-in for a very popular thing, they will be more willing to spend a penny so that we can spend a penny. You like that? And look, I'd be quite, I'm so confident that they will come through with a positive reaction to this. If they come through with a negative reaction to this, I'll start digging the second toilet myself. We are lucky to have the community up there who are prepared to work together with council rather than just put their hand out and demand. I'd like to pay tribute in particular to Katie King, to Megan Campbell, Daphne Bell, Diana Wood, and some phenomenal women and the group up there of the North East Community Hub who are doing just brilliant things up there and are approaching everything with an open mind. So we're very lucky to have this community who are prepared to work together on this. So, yep, I am in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
I am going to support the motion rather than the amendment in this case, with a little bit of reluctance because I'm nervous about doing policy changes on the hoof without actual planning, and I think while we've looked at the northeast area, we haven't looked at the whole city, and we're putting two into the same patch, which could make others start to feel a bit concerned that they're not getting, you know, Bremworth Park, for instance, is probably the one that Angela's talking about when she talks about the 35-year-old swing and slide. That's just round the corner from her, and that's all she's got to play on. So she needs a bit more up there. But I do think that given that 3 of the first 4 destination playgrounds were on the west, it shows how effective the West Ward councillors have been over the last 3 years. And the 4th one was right on the riverbank anyway, so it might as well have been in the west. But we do need to be even-handed, so that's why we have a plan, especially in this area. It's important that you have a plan, not because you're trying to be bureaucratic, because you're trying to make sure that the available resource is shared somewhat evenly around the city. But there is no doubt that the northeast has grown a lot faster, like Mark says, than we had envisaged, and that our infrastructure up there our social infrastructure especially, hasn't kept up with the growth of the area. We've got lots of roads and lots of sewage pipes, but bugger all else. And that's the point that the locals have been making up there for quite a few years. I am a bit suspicious about the Ministry of Education intentions. It's Sylvester Primary School area, no secret about that. They're trying to sell off Richmond Park School, they're shutting down school buses, they're closing rather than building school pools, and in Auckland Central they're talking about having no amenities apart from classrooms at all because the community will provide the rest. So I just see that as a bit of a growing trend on the Ministry of Education. I think our intentions are honourable to have a good partnership with them. I question the intentions coming back the other way and would certainly like staff to ride herd on that. I think Haripuki Park, when you look at a map of the area and where the development's starting to happen now and the remains of Rotuna, is much more in the centre actually than Te Huia Reserve, and we should have probably thought about that earlier. We were thinking about where the houses were 3 years ago when we came up with Te Huia. If we'd looked at where the houses are now, we wouldn't probably have come up with that patch for a destination playground, which is why I support that. And I think Sally is probably right that if we were to get outside money in any area at all for city council projects, this playgrounds is the one that's somewhat easy, and I put easy in inverted commas, to get support for. So Andrew's questions were good, but I think this is probably the one area where the staff answers might be actually quite accurate. The one area.
Councillor Henry.
Support this motion. So, as we have got plenty of them on the west side. And driving through Rotutuna, it's a landscape of houses and not that much else. So, but I do understand Mayor Andrews' concerns, and because of our financial constraints, we have actually a wonderful opportunity now to be creative and think very differently about building playgrounds. And I just alluded to that before, that we can look at community participation, school participation. I mean, golly, all these young, strong men that are, you know, sitting behind computers, I think they can get out there and do some physical work. Pardon? Excuse me? They work a whole lot harder, sorry. Well, we're not going to get into that one. Yeah, so, I mean, there's composting toilets, rainwater collection, cob, adobe. We could look at what we do with Arbor Day, how many people help there, and we could do the same there as well. I mean, we look at the Amish, what they do in America, building, you know, community, bringing a community together, and they will... I just know when people build something, they will look after it a whole lot better than if it's built by us and we control it again, everything. People don't care as much about it. So I just would like to see that a lot more. So I believe that the community will help, and that it is a wonderful, probably a wonderful way to be involved with them, because I don't like when afterwards when we come back here and we say, well, we need another $1 million now. No, I don't want to hear that either. I totally get that. So I just believe that there's other ways, and we can just let's think new and green and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
I don't know if the Amish community is all perfect. From it. With respect, that's a personal view. I don't see the Amish community as my role model, but that respect your views. Obviously, this is democracy. I just want to compliment staff on the very innovative approach I think we are taking around that partnership. I do, however, think that the Mayor raises a very good point around process, and I will probably be supporting motion 2 because the key word is in principle, and my understanding is, if you like, the final tick-off has to be through our annual plan, through our budgets meeting, and it also has to take account of the submission process. And obviously, as I acknowledge the good community activists in this area, one of the crunch issues that will be coming up, particularly in the long-term plan, will be the funding of a range of community and city facilities. And my inclination personally is, if I'm given a choice between more neighbourhood playgrounds facilities versus less major whiz-bang destination playgrounds, to be honest, I'm probably veering to more in the sense that I think that is probably more effective. You know, what is the kind of facilities and playgrounds, as I said, that the people can actually walk to? I think we do have some amazing destination, i.e. the lake, which is a city-wide facility, and others. In terms of the North East, very happy to join the East Ward councillors to help you advocate for your patch, which Dave and I have done over many years, and others. But, you know, we've got the issue, for example, of a library facility. Can we achieve a school city council partnership, or is it a kind of a PPP model in terms of some other investor up there? So there are a whole range of things, colleagues, that we're really going to have to crunch through the long-term plan. What I will insist on, however, is if we do any playground, for example, adjacent to a school which is benefiting that school community, I will want written into the agreement that the school will guarantee all of their green space, that in 5 years' time they don't have some new board of trustees come along and fence their school off. I can understand around the fencing some of the buildings off, you know, because of maintenance issues and security issues. I get that. But I think there's some of those dynamics. And let me just quote two what I think are quite hero schools, and I'll not talk about some of the other schools which I don't think are heroes. I've quoted Myra Intermediate, and I just remind you again with the great Delwyn Bain, the former principal, worked out that her area provided the only bit of green space within X 100 metres, X kilometre of her neighbourhood. So they fenced the buildings, kept the green space, the playing fields open for the kids at the weekends. Hero school. Hamilton Boys High School, under the very capable leadership of Susan Hassel, you know, they've got some really wonderful, if you look at all the work they're doing in terms of their sports fields, their indoor rec centre, their swimming pool facilities, they haven't fenced their school off, right? And I think those are the kind of behaviours that we as a council should be very assertive and encourage. So I'm really looking forward to the LTP, because this is a much bigger issue than just a playground here or a playground there. This is an issue about how we maximise partnership with the Ministry of Education. And when we talk about Ministry of Education and schools, Madam Chair, we're actually talking about ourselves, because we as taxpayers pay for all of those state schools, and we as taxpayers should have some very clear views in this city about how we maximise the community use of all of those school campuses. So I'm really looking forward to that kind of partnership, and compliment the staff on their initiative in this area.
Thank you very much, Mayor King.
We're not in a robust financial position that we thought we were in. There's nothing in the 10-year plan about the second playground. So the 10-year plan, there's nothing in there about it. We should be doing one playground, and we should be doing one playground well. Now, we know that the other playgrounds we've put in have cost around about 1.2 million. And we know that there's about $200,000 coming in donations. That's $1 million of council money for each destination playground to do it well. We're being told here by staff that we can do 2 playgrounds for $920,000. This isn't healthy innovation. Do the math, it just doesn't add up.
Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. Following up on what Mayor Andrew said, 4 or 5 months ago, I can't remember quite when it was, but certainly early in our term, members of the council, the media and the community were horrified at possibly the poor financial position the council was in. It turned out after a bit of investigation that in actual fact our position was not so bad at the moment, but going forward we would have to be very, very careful about how we spent our money. I think that given that we are already in the process of trying to get some hundreds of millions of dollars interest-free from the government to do the stuff we need to be doing, which is infrastructure funding, that it is at least we need to make this decision not in the context of now, but in the context of, and I appreciate it has to be the annual plan, I would prefer it was in the context of the 10-year plan, but in the context at least of the annual plan, so that we can weigh up our responsibilities, weigh up the other alternatives, because this money is money that is contesting with money for core infrastructure. And when we start talking about core infrastructure, we're talking about homes for families. You can all wring your hands when someone's just, raising a family in the backseat of a car, but we can do something about it by changing the trajectory of our spending. And I think what we're doing here is out of context and is going to start to put the pressure that we thought we might be able to alleviate with the decisions we were going to make through the 10-year plan. So I suggest, councillors, that you just think about, if you were up in arms 4 months ago about, good God, I didn't get told this, no one told this, you've been told now, and you've been told a number of times. We need to start pulling in our belt and looking out for where we spend our money. And it's all about priorities, and I'm sorry, but this to me is not a priority when we're talking about infrastructure for homes or infrastructure to develop businesses and jobs and prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallett. No, I wasn't going to speak to this, but I am now, because you've sparked something I'd like to say. You have, but I'm not going to actually agree with you entirely, so sorry about that. But this is a very interesting conversation for me. I saw it as a good way of making the dollars stretch and putting something in where there is a need. The costs and the design of the playgrounds have to be worked through before we give final approval, so that gives me some comfort. We're not agreeing to anything other than a concept being developed around these, and I know that the conversations with the community around both playgrounds have been many. So I think we should continue those conversations with a goal at the end of it, and the goal at the end of it is providing an amenity for those communities. What I find really interesting about these conversations, and I don't disagree with Mayor Andrew that these things are going to all come to the long-term plan. They are, in fact, going to come there as well. We must start matching the rollout of our amenities and facilities to the growth. We must provide for existing and emerging development. Otherwise, we have vast housing areas with families living in there and nothing else. Now, I was very privileged to go on a field trip with Sally around all of, well, not only in the east, but in the west, a number of our parks and facilities and parks and playgrounds and things. And it was a real eye-opener because up in the north, east of Hamilton, literally there are bare paddocks all over the place with nothing on them. And some of these are quite expensive to develop in full. They're going to take a long-term approach. And we are going to have some really hard talks in the long-term plan as to what we can actually fund in the short term, in the medium term, and in the longer term. But you can't leave a subdivisions as big as we've built up in the northeast with nothing, because that just is a soulless city in my view. Those people who have been encouraged to develop there are entitled to a level of amenity and facility. Some sports grounds, some playgrounds, some shopping centres, and as is appropriately provided for. And that's why I am going to support Angela's motion. I am looking forward to delivering something within our constrained budget to the northeast of Hamilton. Okay, thank you. That brings it, oh, sorry, Councillor Taylor.
Look, I will be supporting the motion. I would have thought we would actually be applauding an opportunity to get 2 for 1, really. That's what we should be doing. And I tend to agree with the Deputy Mayor that I don't think every playground we need to do needs to be $1 million playground myself. I think we should be looking at encouraging smaller playgrounds where people can walk to them as well, and just make that dollar go a bit further. I know there's a high level of need in the northeast for such things. And that's what happens when you grow at the rate that we've grown. I think, there's no doubt about it. In the long-term plan, we've got some big decisions because there's a whole lot more coming from where this came from. There's a need for more parks. There's a library. There's an aquatic centre. All these things out in the northeast. So I think in the long-term plan, we're going to need to have a discussion about do we need to develop a Rototuna rate? There seems to be a desire amongst Rototuna people, judging from what Councillor Pascoe said the other day, to pay a little bit extra to get some of these things moving a bit quicker. So I'd like to flag that that's something that I think we need to be discussing very much in the long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mayor Andrew, you have foreshadowed, I'm just asking you though, you've foreshadowed. Yes, I know that. I'm just was going to alert you to the fact that you have this on the, or you might want to bring it. You've got a sense of the numbers. I was just wondering whether you wanted to pursue that, but I will give Angela the right. You can't withdraw it. Okay, Angela, write a reply.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not quite sure where Councillor Mallett was coming from. This is annual plan stuff. This is money that's in the budget. This is year 3 of the long-term plan. We consulted heavily on playgrounds during the development of the policy and the destinations plan, and we consulted heavily when we did the long-term plan. And playgrounds, if I can remember rightly, we got a lot of submissions. So this whole process in the last 3 years of rolling out playgrounds was heavily consulted by. So I don't know why some are quite opposed to this, because we've gone out there, we said this is what we're going to do, and people said great, get on with it. So that's what we're doing. Mayor Andrew talked about healthy innovation and that this isn't what this is, and he's talking about in a financial capacity, but healthy innovation in a city, I think we did it exceptionally well when we started with the playgrounds plan, and you know, other councils around the country are trying to follow us and trying to be as good as Hamilton in this space, and they're visiting us and they're wanting to know, you know, how we came up with this. So I think we're leading in New Zealand for our playgrounds. I think staff have incredibly have got the message incredibly well. Don't come back to us asking for more money, because you are not going to get it, and I take comfort in that. I think the motion covers that off very well, and also, you know, if we're not happy with the design or the funding proposal, and that should include an indication from the Ministry of Education on what, you know, how much they're going to put in, they're going to put their hands in their pockets, and also external funding. And we've got a great track record with external funders. You know, Rotary and other clubs love to put their hand in their pocket for playgrounds. Yeah, so it's not ad hoc spending, it's in the plan. 2 for the price of 1, well, that's up to you guys to convince us with the design and stuff that comes back to us. It's kind of a no-brainer for me. Thank you.
Yes, yep.
Complete sentence said, this isn't healthy innovation, do the math, it doesn't add up. It was just a part sentence that was quoted.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I was just meaning in terms of the financial.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, we're to put the amendment first in any case. No right to reply on an amendment, I've been told. Do you want to speak? And you've spoken to it already. Yeah. That's right. That's right. I'm getting to the finesse of this. Councillor O'Leary, your standing orders are quite different from WRC's, I have to say, so there's a few finesse bits that I still have to catch up with. Okay, so we're going to put it to the vote now. That's the amendment goes first. So this, we're voting. Can we clear that, please? Can we? Right, so we're going to do it again. Can you clear that, please? And we'll go. We are voting on the amendment gets put first. Amendment, everyone? Okay, the amendment
is lost.
Thank you. So now we will we will go to the vote for the substantive motion here.
The motion is carried, 10 for, 2 against.
And now I'm going to give you even better news. I'm going to liberate you for lunch. Liberate. That's 1:15, so in 3/4 of an hour. So you mean 2 o'clock? Yep, 2 o'clock. Yep.